All right, good afternoon, everybody. It is 4 o'clock here in Los Angeles. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to your Veritas course. My name is Ravi. I will be your instructor on camera for the next 6 weeks. Megan will be our second instructor off camera. So together we are here to guide you on your journey. Today's lesson is the first lesson of the course. It is called the Foundations of Logic, and that's because what we're going to be doing here today is obviously going through logic and how it really is going to be applicable throughout the rest of your GMAT journey. But before we get there, there are a few, I don't want to call them administrative tasks, but in some sense, get a quick sense of what the GMAT itself is all about. Then we're going to talk about the actual Veritas prep methodology. How's this course going to be structured and run? We'll take our first break at that point. You are free to take your breaks at any point as you wish, but that's the end of the first hour. I typically take a break, and then at the end of the second hour, I typically take a break. In the second hour, we'll come back and take a look at some GMAT question types, talk about some strategies involving the questions that you'll see on test day. Take our final break, and then we'll get into the GMAT logic, how to get some of these questions and see how the logic is affecting it, and then finishing out with what to do on your end for the rest of this course. Now, that being said, this first hour is in some sense the most painful hour for me because it is a very lecture-heavy hour. I will never talk nonstop as I will this first hour ever again, I promise you. So bear with me on that. After we get into that first break, after that it becomes a hell of a lot more interactive, just the way I like it. However, let me also go on the record right now and say, in my opinion, this first hour of this course that we're going to be talking about is easily, by far and away, the single most important hour in the entire 36-hour series. So I just want to make sure you realize that. If you're there and you're starting to just say, F this, I'm going to zone out right now, huge mistake. You got to be eyes wide open, ears wide open, soaking up every last word that I lay out, because I'm telling you right now, this first hour is mission critical. Now, at the end of this first hour, what I plan to do is walk through the features of this classroom, making sure we all see how things operate in here. I will then also introduce myself. Megan will introduce herself, and I will ask each and every single one of you guys to introduce yourselves at that point. And so as people kind of trickle on in, wasting my time now to do it, since I don't want to repeat myself. Now, that also being said, I also want to make expressly clear how in here, I'll go through the features of the classroom later, but as far as for right now, if you have any questions at all for this first hour until I suppose I get into the features of the classroom, then you just need to ask your questions in the main chat room right in front of you. That's it. Now, if you're going to ask questions, my only rule for right now is make sure you're asking something about something that's on the screen. If you start asking questions about things that are not on the screen, you are being really rather disruptive. Again, this is not private tutoring. I just want to make sure we understand that. Just because you're in the room by yourself and then it seems like maybe I'm just talking to you right now on camera, don't mean we're having a one-on-one session. We've got quite a few other people in the classroom with us. So just the same way as if we were in an in-person class and you saw some idiot start asking questions about things that the teacher ain't even talking about and you want to just pummel him to death, like that's going to be the same sentiment in here. And if it ain't the other students, I guarantee you it will be me. So the only thing I just want to make sure we follow some basic guidelines. Again, I'll go through a lot of my rules and regulations at the end of this first hour, but till we get to that point, any questions at all, make sure they're about what's up here. If they're not, either private chat or put it on pause and wait until it is a more appropriate time. And on that note, I also want to make one comment about free trial students. I know we have a handful of free trial students sitting in today. That's great. Welcome. However, know one thing. This is not an info session. This is not a sales pitch. This ain't anything of the sort. This is the freaking first lesson of our course. And so you are a guest right now. That's all. And thus, I encourage you to participate. I encourage you to take things in. But if you got questions that are more sales-oriented, hit up the sales team. If you got questions that are more customer service-oriented, hit up the customer service team. I am a teacher. I'm here to teach. If there are questions I might be able to answer, feel free to hit me up via private chat. But I just want to be very crystal clear about that. I run a pretty tight ship in here, folks. I don't tolerate a lot of nonsense. That may be something you like, it may be something you don't like. That's okay. We'll sort that out at the end of this first hour. But as a result, I just want to be very clear at the outset on how things are going to run in here, so that we can get started with, I think, again, the most important hour of this journey. So with that then, let's go ahead and get started with the GMAT. Now, a lot of you are taking this course as the first step of your GMAT journey. That is to say, hey, I'm studying for the GMAT, I want to go to business school, it's time for me to take a class, and that's great. I love students that are coming at this on first impression because I don't got to worry about bad habits that I got to correct. On the same note, I know for a fact we have quite a few retakes up in here, people that have already taken the class before and didn't do it right the first time and are now back to do it right, hopefully the second time, which is good. I encourage you, if you're a retake, to hit me up via my email and tell me why you're here, how you screwed it up, what you need to plan to do differently on this go-around. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. Now, for those of us that are not familiar with the GMAT, let me just walk through what is the classic default structure of the test. I say default structure because you could choose how you want to take this test in two different ways other than the default. And according to GMAT statistics, 90% of you are going to do just that. Only 10% of you are going to stick with the original order. Now, in my email welcoming you to the course, and I'm going to reference this email quite a bit, and I talked about, before you walked in the chat room there, I said, hey, everyone has this email in their inbox. I'll talk more about it at the end of this first hour. But in my email welcoming you to the class, I gave you a great blog post to read to even have you thinking about which order would work well for you. It don't matter, and it shouldn't matter what I would do, or what Megan would do, or what my mother would do as far as how we would take these tests. It's all about how you should do it, and in order to figure that out, it becomes a deeply personal question. And so I want to make sure you understand that, and then obviously invest some time into trying to figure that out. But for the purposes of the default order, let me walk through this, and obviously you change as needed. Now, check it. If any of you are looking at me right now saying, what, you could take the test in any order you want? That's awesome. No, that's not awesome. You need to spend some time on MBA.com, which is GMAC's official website, and learn about this damn test that you're planning to take. So some of this stuff can't be earth-shattering news to you. If it is, you're not doing a good job already preparing for the frickin' prep process. So first things first is just a quick check-in process. That is to say, you go in, you show them a little ID, they take your picture, they scan your hand, they basically empty out your pockets, and then they sit you down in front of a computer. You go through the tutorial. That tutorial is now available online, so you can do that at your leisure. The test then begins with what's known as the analytical writing assessment. It is an essay. It's 30 minutes long. You don't get a choice of what you want to write about, but GMAC's already released most of the topics that you will see on test day, so that's good news. You can download those on MBA.com. They're also at the back of your official guides. A lot of people don't care about this section, folks, and by a lot I mean like 99% of the folks out there, including but not limited to the people taking the test, the people evaluating the test, meaning the admissions officers at the B schools that you want to go to, as well as the people writing the test, meaning the folks at GMAC. And I say they don't care about it because they used to have 2 essays. They culled it out and only made it 1, and then they introduced the IR section in its place. And on top of which now 90% of you are taking the test in a slightly different order, where analytical writing becomes the very last thing you do. So as a result, it's an afterthought for many people, and it's with good reason. It's because this is not part of your 800 score, but it's instead on a scale out of 6 points. Now, because it's something that no one cares about, we will talk about it on the day that arguably no one cares about, the last day of class. However, when you are doing this assignment, what you're asked to do is evaluate an argument. And that skill is going to be very dependent on logic and your understanding of critical reasoning. And that skill is something we're going to be talking about not only in the verbal section of things, but honestly what seems like every single week. So we'll talk about it absolutely on the last day of class, but the underlying skill set every single week until then. Now, after those 30 minutes are up, you roll into the second section of the test. This is known as integrated reasoning. It is called integrated reasoning because it's integrating quantitative and verbal reasoning. So this is a mix of both math and English, essentially, questions. It is multiple choice again. You get 12 questions you got to answer in 30 minutes, so it's 2.5 minutes on average. But this section sucks, folks, because there are quite a few bubbles you need to bubble for each question, and there's no partial credit. And so it can kind of rock your world as you start to realize, oh, I've done some of the question right, but I got to spend more time on it to make sure I do all the question right. Maybe. Or maybe you just got to let it go. Now, this section a lot of people don't care about either. Again, partly because it's not part of your 800 score. This is graded on a scale out of 8 points. But also partly because this section is only 5 years old. None of the B schools are publishing these stats as if this is an important number. Oh, what's your GPA? What's your GMAT? What's your IR score? No one cares. And as a result, these two sections are ones that you just want to do well enough on. Just don't embarrass yourself. And we'll talk about this section as well on the last day of class. Now, after this first hour is where you get your first break. It is 8 minutes long. 8 minutes is not 7 minutes. 8 minutes is not 9 minutes. 8 minutes is 8 minutes. That's important to understand. Now, of course, it's optional. You don't need to take the break if you don't want to, but I strongly recommend you do. Because on test day, you don't have the luxury of what you probably are going to make the foolish mistake while studying of doing, which is drinking while you're studying, eating while you're studying, peeing at will while you're studying, listening to music while you're studying. There's all sorts of things you cannot do on test day. I encourage all of you to go to MBA.com, spend a couple hours there just surfing all the damn pages, and including downloading what they call the GMAT handbook, and go through, it's like a 20-page easy reading PDF of all the do's and don'ts on test day. That includes such things as like, hey, you don't got no watch that you can walk through, you don't got no calculator you can use. Ah, great, Megan gave you guys a link. Download that shit, read it tomorrow if you haven't read it already. Now, that 8 minutes, I wouldn't do 8 minutes either. Now, some of you have to understand that if you take a 10-minute break, is it a big deal? Not really. But do understand that the very next section, which is quant, and they have 62 minutes on the clock, won't have 62. The test starts without you. It'll be at 60 minutes when you sit your ass back down in front of the computer, and then all of a sudden you're going to start to hyperventilate. You're going to say, oh my God, you should have gotten there earlier. So if I were you, I would keep my break closer to 5 minutes, because what you have to remember is when you leave what will turn out to be a pseudo minimum security prison environment is you got to come back in. And to come back in, you got to go through the same check-in process. And I'm not worried terribly about you, but I'm worried about everybody else and their mother. So that includes the people in front of you trying to get in the room, the proctor himself trying to let you in, as well as the computers. Let me be clear, GMAC Center computers are known notoriously to crash at the best of times. And that, of course, can derail some of you. But hey, if you expect the worst, be pleasantly surprised if it goes smoothly. And so keep it down to just a few minutes, enough to go pee, drink, eat, smoke, whatever you got to do, get your ass back in front of the test, because this is where now the test actually begins with the quant and verbal. And again, this is the default order. Many of you are actually going to do this stuff as the very first things you do. Quant is 62 minutes. You got 31 questions, so 2 minutes a question on average. These questions are going to be split roughly 50-50 into two types of questions. One is known as problem solving, one is known as data sufficiency. Problem solving is a question type that is very familiar if you've taken even one single standardized math test in your life. Here's the math question, here are 5 answer choices, knock yourself out, it's not complicated. Data sufficiency is It's unique to this test. It rocks people's worlds until they understand it. Data sufficiency, as its name implies, wants to know if you have sufficient data to answer a question. Do you have enough information to answer a question? They actually don't often care about the actual answer itself. They just want to know, can you get it done? That question type is unique to this test. We will spend the entire 4th week's math lesson talking data sufficiency. But every week before week 4 and after week 4, we will do data sufficiency, folks. It'll just be a handful of questions in any given lesson. So what you can take from that is it don't matter what the content itself is, whether it's arithmetic, algebra, geo, stats, combinatorics, probability, it don't matter. They can test you in either a problem-solving way or data sufficiency way, but roughly split 50-50 on test day. Then you get another break. Strongly recommend you take that break. Probably even more importantly, because some of you are going to crash and burn on quant and you need your verbal score to shine. Well, during that break, use it to give yourself a pep talk. And of course, some of you are going to crush quant and then eat it on verbal, so give yourself a chance to pep talk yourself up so you can get yourself ahead in the game, to focus and try to do the best you can with what you got. So take these breaks. They're mission critical, folks. And then finally, you have the verbal section. Here you've got 36 questions in 65 minutes, so slightly less than 2 minutes a question. These are split roughly third into 3 types of questions: critical reasoning, reading comprehension, and sentence correction. I am writing them in that order because that's the order in which we will cover them in this course. I do teach out of sequence in this course. The schedule, of course, has been emailed to you in my email welcoming you to the course. But I want to be clear, whether it's in the world of quant or the world of verbal, they can just throw questions around any which way they want and throw them at you until they just cycle through the number they're supposed to give you. But this is roughly third, so roughly a dozen. So, what is critical reasoning? Like its name implies, reasoning critically. If you are familiar with the LSAT, the law school admissions test, you know this section by another name. It's called logical reasoning over there. And it makes sense. Lawyers are supposed to be logical. Well, we as business leaders are supposed to be logical, so let's just do the same damn questions. Reading comprehension. Reading comprehension. Can you comprehend what you read? If you've taken one standardized test in your life, my guess is you've already done reading comp before. And I would argue for that reason itself, I think this is the easiest question type on this test. The challenge is the timing aspect to it. And so we're going to have to learn how to deal with the strategy involving reading comp far more quickly than you may realize. I think a lot of people disrespect reading comprehension. You can't afford to do that. Finally, sentence correction. Can you correct sentences? That's basically what it's about. And thus, it begs the word grammar and your knowledge thereof. However, I will say this much. If all you do is memorize a bunch of grammar rules, you still ain't going to crush sentence correction, because it's about strategy and how you get things done quickly. So just understand that. Now, it is these 2 sections, of course, that make up that 800 score of the test. This is where we will focus the thrust of our attention. This will be last day of class, but the underlying skills we're talking about for the next 6 weeks as well. But this is what makes up your test on test day. So notice we're talking about basically like a 3.5 hour exam. You've got to be at the top of your game for that long, at least for 2+ hours, right? Then you add in this first hour, which will be the last hour for many of you. And then, of course, with the breaks, the pregame, you're spending 3.5 hours on test day. Why is that important? Because you need to start to practice the way you're going to play. I think a lot of fools want to say, oh yeah, practice makes perfect. It's like, no, you idiot. It's perfect practice that makes perfect. And that starts with just practicing the way you're going to play. So if I know that I got to do 31 questions in 62 minutes, you better believe I'm routinely practicing 31 questions in 62 minutes, and my email welcoming you to the course suggested you even start to tackle your homework in such a fashion. It makes no sense for me to do 1 question 2 minutes. Okay, 1 question 2 minutes, that's stupid. And we'll talk much more about that in a bit. So I just want to make sure you realize that if you can't sit for 62 minutes and study, to yourself without food, drink, distractions, looking at your cell phone, you're effed on test day. Start to practice now what you need, discipline and all. All right, so with that then, I want to get into the computer adaptive test aspect to the GMAT. For many people, this is the first computer adaptive test they've ever taken in their life, hopefully the last, and it's arguably very different than even the GRE, which is adaptive. And so what you see here is a system that is so efficient like none other, folks. They can do so much with so little. Back in the day before the adaptivity ever came around, they used to do not boatloads, but a hell of a lot more questions on the test and sit you through hours upon hours upon hours to figure out how good you are or how bad you are. Now they don't need to do that. And part of the reason they don't need to do that is they're constantly assessing your skill set based off how you respond to the questions in front of you. And so this is a very dumbed down way of looking at it. In fact, in my email welcoming you to the course, I give you a great link for our Talking with the Test Maker series, a bunch of nice, short, sweet videos that everybody should cycle through at least once, possibly 2 times, folks, just to get a real good sense of how things really operate. F me, F Megan, F anybody at headquarters. Talk to the guy who was in charge of how this test was done, and that's as good as it'll ever get. And so what they basically say is, hey, look, man, answer a question. If you can get it right, you must be good. Let's give you a tougher one. If you can't get it right, you might not be that good. Let's give you an easier one. And that is basically it. So, here's an example. Like, all right, are you mediocre? Yeah, you are. You're better than that? Great. Let's kick you up a notch. Kick you into the 60s. Are you better than that? Yeah, you are. Sweet. Let's kick you into the 80s. Are you better than that? Oh, shit, you're not? Okay, let's bring you back down. We're not going to bring you down to the 60s because you're clearly better than the 60s. That's at least what you just told us a couple questions ago. So let's kind of kick you somewhere in between until we can figure out where you belong. Now, that is important to understand. There are some people that are going to try to game this. There are some people that are going to say, okay, so wait a minute. If I can just spend 62 minutes in the world of quant as an example, and just get, 15, 16, 17 questions right in a row, won't I be looking at the 99.9th percentile level questions, and therefore aren't I going to walk out with an 800? Dude, this is genius. And it's like, well, wait a minute. I get that when the mic drops and you're on that 15, 16, 17 question after 62 minutes are up, you're at the 99.9th level percent, and those questions are ridiculously impossible. But the test maker is going to say to you at that point, all right, that's nice and all, but normally people that get a 99 percentile, even on the quant section as an example, are able to do 31 questions in 62 minutes. Your ass did half of them. How the hell do you want to get a 99th percentile just the same way as they do when you haven't even done half the questions? Get the F out. Let's prorate your score and give you about half of what you were looking for. So go home with the 49th percentile you deserve. So you have to realize, folks, there is a significant penalty for not finishing. So yeah, this is how things operate, but it's far more complex than that. So with that, then, I want to kind of make sure we talk about a few key implications about this. And again, part of this should seem relatively intuitive now that I've described how the system operates. The first is you're not going to be able to return to previous questions. After all, I can't get to question 7 until I'm done with question 6. Now, on other tests, maybe when you suck at question 6 and you're like, oh man, question 6 is about probability and I lose all my money when I go to Vegas, so I suck at this question type. I'll come back to it later. I'll do the best I can now. No, that's not happening. You give it your best, you move on. Once you're done with 6, you're done with 6. You cannot return. Very important to realize that, because sometimes people use that as a psychological crutch and or a legit crutch where you come back and you fix what you kind of broke the first time. Not happening. Now, because of that, you can't save questions either. So you can't skip them. Sometimes we'll skip questions like, oh, that looks beefy, that's huge, that's a big paragraph, I can't read that, I'll come back to it later. No, you won't. Do what you can, otherwise you ain't ever seen the next question. And for that reason, they tell you that pacing is extremely important. And what I would say to you is I think this is a bit of a lie, in my opinion. I think pacing is not extremely important. I think pacing is everything. Pacing is everything. A lot of people, when they start a journey like this, want to get so focused on only one thing, accuracy. I just want to learn how to do it right. I'll worry about pacing later. by the time you eventually start to worry about pacing, it's too late. And so, in my opinion, from the outset, I strongly encourage you, don't just focus your ass on accuracy, focus on efficiency as well. Get it done quickly. Get it done right, but get it done quickly. And thus, you're going to hear me constantly try to push you in your, hey, if you want to beat this test, you got to learn to beat the timer. And it starts with pacing. So don't think pacing is important. Don't think pacing is extremely important. Pacing is everything, everybody. Now, look at this last point. I think this is an important point because I think this is a little bit more psychological, and this test will wreak psychological havoc on you, on those that are mentally weak on test day, by the way. It says, when you're performing well, almost all the questions you receive will be very difficult. Now, how do you define well? How do you define very difficult? I don't know. I don't care. That is to say, some of us, performing well means we're in the 9th percentile. Okay. For some of us, we're in the 89th percentile. Okay. The way this test is structured is to constantly try to break you, push you to the limits, and essentially kind of bring you back. And so if I'm in the 9th percentile and that's my skill set, as soon as I start seeing stuff in like the 19th percentile, that stuff makes me cry. It's tough. It's supposed to be. The same way if I'm in the 89th percentile and they're pushing me, they're going to give me 99th percentile stuff, and I can't do that. I start pissing in my pants. But it's supposed to do that. So I think a lot of people don't understand this test. They constantly are measuring their progress or performance by how many questions I got right, how many questions I got wrong. Who gives two shits, man? It's about what types of questions you're getting right, what types of questions you're getting wrong. So it's far more important to understand that. 99ers, we miss all sorts of questions all sorts of time, but it's not the easy stuff that we miss. And I think that's important to just kind of start to get your head wrapped around. And so with that, I want to talk about now something that's very, very important. And I've already started to kind of suggest as much. But, you know, they say, hey, look, man, pacing is not linear, and stubbornness is punished. And I want to comment on this part here, because in my email welcome me to the course as well, I said, hey, don't ever talk to me about 2 minutes a question. I think, again, that's just dumb. And I want to kind of really highlight that in a big way, because people can get really stubborn on this test, folks. And when they say punished, I think they're being kind. Let me say that. And so just as a quick example, you know the world of quant gives you 2 minutes a question on average. That's the average. 62 minutes, 31 questions, divide the 2, you're at 2. That's how it works. But does that mean every question should take 2 minutes? Hell no. Will there be questions that are going to take you 3 minutes? Abso-freaking-lutely. But if a question is going to take you 3 minutes, you can't do that all the damn time. You got to be able to balance it out. So how do you balance it out? You balance it out with another question that should take you 1 minute. Are there questions that should take you 1 minute? You bet there are. What about those of us that want to spend 3.5 minutes on a question? Is that a problem? Not in my opinion, it's not. But in order to knock out a 3.5 minute question, that means I got to knock out another question in 30 seconds. And can I do that? Yeah, there are questions that are there that I should knock out in 30 seconds. But surprisingly, people are much more able to spend 3.5 minutes on a question, but not really 30 seconds. So you start to see where people start to fall. But where does the point of no return come? When you start to spend 4+ minutes on a question. Even 4 minutes, but even 4+ happens all the damn time. Well, in order for me to average this out, that means I need to knock out a question in 0 or even negative seconds if I'm spending more than 4 minutes to average out to 2 minutes. Now let me say this. Nobody is getting this question correct because you didn't even frickin' spend any time on it. So how the hell are you going to get it right? So you already missed that question guaranteed. The reality is you're missing that question too. And part of the reason that's a reality is because if you knew what you were up to, you would have got it right much earlier in the process. So when you're getting stubborn and you're doubling down on a question that you clearly don't know how to do, you are going to get punished for being that stubborn, because you're not going to just miss one question, you're going to miss 2 questions, and that's how you start to get brutalized on this exam. So pacing ain't linear, folks. There will be some people that are going to say, oh, sweet, I did this question in 2 minutes. I'm pretty good, huh? No, you're an idiot. You spent double the time. You should. That was a 1-minute question. You spent 2 minutes on it. How are you satisfied with that performance? On the flip side, that same fool will then look at a question like this and then cry that he could not get it in 2 minutes and feel like an abject failure. And the only reason he's an abject failure is because he does not understand that pacing is not linear. But if he understood that, I wouldn't cry if I couldn't get a 3-minute question in 2 minutes. I'm not supposed to. So let's just make sure we understand that as well. Pacing is not linear. I cannot stress that enough. Now this right here is perhaps the most important point in the last 30 minutes that I'm going to have made. It's very, very critical that we understand this, folks. So it says, your floor is more important than your ceiling. So what are they talking about with this floor and ceiling crap? So notice, right? You're on a computer adaptive test. The way this operates is you're constantly moving up, down, up, down, up, down, until they figure out where you belong. The floor is what's below you, the questions that are within your skill set. The ceiling is what's above you, the stuff that you really can't do that's keeping you down. A lot of people want to focus all their energy over here. And I get it. After all, how do you get to the top? You got to break through the ceiling. And so if you look at this first point, notice what it says. It says, on average, 1 out of 5 questions above your level will be false positives. Now, what does that mean? What is a false positive? A false positive, in my opinion, is telling the test maker you're smarter than you really are. Because after all, if it's above your level, you're not supposed to get it, but you could randomly get it right. Hell, my 4-year-old daughter can get 99 percentile level questions correct on this test. Is that because she's a 99er? No. It's because if I give her 5 questions, she knows her alphabet, she bubbles A 5 times, she's probably going to get 1 right. Now, is the test maker going to automatically give her a 99 percentile score? Hell no. The test maker is going to look at her and be like, well, are you really a 99er? Or is this a false positive? And thus, they're going to start to adjust her score a little bit, not just automatically roll out the red carpet. But take a look at this second point, because I think this is very important. It says, it's up to you to minimize / eliminate false negatives. So what's a false negative? A false negative is telling the test maker you're dumber than you really are. I got a question wrong that I actually know how to get right. Like 2 + 2, what is that? 3? Oh shit, it's not? Too late. I'm done for. The test maker is not going to say, well, maybe you're not that dumb. No. The test maker is going to be like, shit, homeboy can't even do 2 + 2? There is 0 chance that I'm going to kick him even into the 50th percentile. Let's kick him right down into the 30th or whatever. And so what you start to realize is that they're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt here with regard to false negatives. With the false positives, they doubt everything. And so thus, yeah, getting these tough questions right, the ceiling stuff, will definitely help you on this exam. But it will not help you nearly as much as getting the easy questions wrong will completely obliterate you. And I think that's really important to understand. And so when they say, hey, look, it's up to you to minimize / eliminate false negatives, do not buy into that, folks. You need to have a 0 tolerance for this false negative bit. Very, very, very important to understand that. There are times where I have people that walk through these doors, so to speak, and they give themselves a free pass every single week in, week out, with regard to sloppy mistakes being made. And they just say every week some bullshit excuse or another. Like, I just got to read more carefully. Yeah, I was too quick. I got to slow down. Or yeah, I got to carry the one next time. Or yeah, I got to pay closer attention to that word. And then, no joke, these are the same idiots in weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8 that start to reach out for help. And they start to say, man, I can't seem to make a break past X. And thus, yeah, this is serious stuff where I hate to admit it, but you'll quickly start to see there will be people in here that are going to fall into this trap. And then they're going to be like, I can't make a breakthrough here. You have any advice for me to help me with my sloppy mistakes that I'm making? And I'm going to say, no, dude. Go back, buy a time machine, go back to week 1, hour 1, and remember this whole part where I told you to eliminate the false negatives and not be the guy who gives yourself a free pass every single time. Oops, too late. And I think that is so important to realize as you start to go through this, that we don't make that kind of mistake. All right. And so I just want to make sure as we go through this journey here, we are able to do things that are one simple principle. Get questions wrong that you don't know how to do. I could teach you, Megan could teach you, anybody could teach you how to do them. But if you get questions wrong that you do know how to do, the whole 2 + 2 is not 3, sorry to inform you, there's not a lot of people that can teach you with that stuff because you know how to do it. You just are choosing not to. And part of that comes from being so stubborn that you're not giving yourself enough time. Maybe it's a 1-minute question, but you're only able to dedicate 30 seconds to it because you effed up your timing elsewhere. So these are kinds of things that you have to keep in mind. So yeah, pacing is everything, and you start to see exactly why. Now, this slide here, in my opinion, is the single most important slide, I think, in this entire 36-hour series. And the reason for it is because it tells you really nicely, really clearly, what this test is all about. So first thing is, it says that it's designed to predict student success in school, and I think every admissions test professes to do that. No one cares about that. I want to focus your attention on the second bullet instead. It says that it measures higher order thinking abilities through quantitative reasoning and verbal reasoning. Now that means, for some of us, that, oh, it's a quant test and it's a verbal test. Let me at the quant and the verbal. But for those of us that are going to crush the crap out of this test, we don't see that it's a quant test or a verbal test. Instead, what we start to recognize is that it's a thinking exam that's all about one thing: reasoning. And it's important you understand that right here, right now, because some of us are going to spend countless hours and countless dollars at this stupid journey. And it's going to be a complete waste of your time if you do not understand what this test is designed to measure. Because here is a pyramid. It's based off educational theory, not on the test, but it really nicely captures how things operate. Meaning, notice what they define as higher order thinking. Notice what they define as not. When you see here that it's all about remembering as the lowest level on the totem pole, that's basically, can you memorize? Slightly above that is just understanding whatever it is you presumably memorized. Think about how many exams you may have crushed in college simply because you memorized a bunch of crap the night before and were able to brain dump it the next day and you understood what it is that you memorized. And boom, you're graduating summa cum laude from the best Ivies there are. That's great and all. Not higher order thinking. So if I want a score that's reflective of higher order thinking, I have to understand here, right now, that memorizing a bunch of crap and understanding what I memorized ain't gonna cut it. If I want a 5-something, sweet, welcome to memorization. But if I want to get a 7-something, as my hope is the vast majority of us want to achieve, dude, I gotta be so far out of this world it's not even funny. And that's important to understand. Higher order thinking is, hey, can I actually apply half of this crap that I've memorized and understood to the situation in front of me? Can I actually analyze the options that I have available to me to try to figure out, hey, what's a better way to go? This way, that way. How do I actually evaluate based on what criteria I've learned before, perhaps? And finally, as I climb myself to the top, can I maybe create a path forward with everything that's at my disposal, out of all this old information that I know perhaps, and maybe create some new information in the process? This is the mountaintop. This is where we want to reach, if, again, we want to do well. And so that creation element is something that a lot of people don't really strive to achieve. They focus their attention down below. But understand something, guys. Yeah, you are going to have to know a lot of things. I'm not going to lie to you and say you don't. You got to know a boatload in here. But above and beyond that, it's going to be how you reason. And that's going to be the single most important differentiator for those of us that are going to do very well on this test and those of us that aren't. And thus, for this reason, I'm going to say often, hey, come back to the first hour of the first day, because this test is different than anything else you've ever done before. The people that are retaking this course know that because they effed it up the first time. Those of us that are doing this on first impression now, do it by setting off on the right foot. You do not want to tackle this by just trying to mail it in on any other test the way you've done, because you're an accomplished individual. Your college transcripts say as much. This GMAT is a widowmaker. It will bring grown men to tears very quickly, and I want to make sure we don't fall into that trap. Now, as far as the Veritas prep methodology is concerned, to kind of piggyback now off of that pyramid of sorts, notice what's at the bottom of this pyramid. It is what's known as the skill builder. The skill builder, like its name implies, will help you build skills. Skills you need for every single lesson. I strongly encourage you to do the skill builder online. Online, things are updated. Online, things have videos, explanations, so on and so forth. The skill builder can take some of you a lot of time. The skill builder can take some of you no time. I have no clue. It depends on how you are. And I say that because some of you don't know what a numerator denominator is, let alone how to add fractions. It's been forever and a day that you've done it. Okay, guess what? Skill Builder is going to take you some time for arithmetic for Wednesday's lesson. Some of you teach, I don't know, third grade math maybe. Yeah, okay, if you teach third grade math, you just did this lesson on the first day of school or whatever, you clearly know that you don't even need to do the skill builder. So, like, we're all going to have differing abilities. Your skill builder will then take, therefore, differing times. The one thing I want to make expressly clear, though, is the skill builder is not higher order thinking. This is simply a bunch of crap that you need to know. And I do not want anybody coming to class expecting that in class here we will talk about the skill builder and those basic concepts like, hey, this is what a numerator is, this is what a denominator is, this is how you add fractions. If that is what you are expecting, this is not the course for you. There is honestly zero value added in that kind of setup. You need to know a lot. The skill builders and office hours, on-demand videos, there are so explanations, there are so many different avenues in the Veritas universe that are designed to help you to get these basic skills. But coming to class to talk about this shows you're a class A idiot on multiple counts, because why would you spend the amount that you're spending to have, arguably, an expert like Megan or myself on this test teach you what the hell a numerator or denominator or how to add fractions? Like, this is important, but not a good use of your time or your money, given that it's kind of a finite resource. Now, if you say, well, no, that's the way I want to do it, though. Well, I'm the master of my own domain. I choose how I want to spend my money and time, and this is how it is. And I say, sweet. go get a damn private tutor. Because this is a group course. And the rest of us appreciate how that's a waste of our time. We'd rather focus our energy on higher order thinking. And so if you are so entitled that you come to class and let everybody else do the grunt work, but you want to now take up the rest of our time, I'm going to tell you to pound sand very quickly. So again, if that's not what you want and you're expecting something different, I don't pull punches. I let you know from day one exactly what you're going to get in this course with me. This is not going to be it. Now, I will in fact teach this course as if you have crushed the skill builder. Not that you did the skill builder, as my email welcoming to the course suggested. Don't just do, crush. Because I don't got time to teach the slowest people in this class. I want to be very clear about that. I teach a very rigorous course in here, but hey, you're going to get out of this exactly what you put into it. If you don't put a lot of your time and effort and energy into this, you're not going to get a lot out of this experience. You're going to say, that was a waste of my time. Maybe. Some of you are going to think this is the best thing that you've ever chosen to do, which is great. But it's the same exact experience, so what the hell different? It's about you and your commitment. My commitment's going to be the same every single time. So I just want to be clear. I do not worry about the skill builder. I presume every time you come to class you've crushed it so that we can then focus our attention up here. I could take your basic skills and then I could start to layer some strategy on top of it. You know a lot, but now let me try to teach you on what you need to be doing. But that ain't even where I want to focus my attention, folks. As a 99er and trying to bust out a bunch of 99ers in you, my attention is at the top of this pyramid. My attention is trying to get you to start to think like the test maker. It's not enough to focus on what I need to know. It's not even enough to focus on what I need to be doing, but it's honestly focusing on what I need to be on the lookout for. Because if I can understand how this test is written, to the point where, shit, I'm starting to create my own questions, my own trap answers, so on and so forth, then I ain't going to get jacked by the test maker when I take it on test day. Because I know exactly what I need to keep my eyes peeled open for. And for me, if I'm on the other end of this camera, I ain't paying good money or spending 3 hours every freaking lesson to learn how to add a fraction. I'm trying to figure out what the hell I got to watch out for. So I want to be very clear on that. Now, what is this think like the test maker? I've had students tell me it sounds like a bunch of marketing bullshit, and I think that's a fair assessment. But then what happens? No joke, I get emails like 3-4 weeks in saying, shit, I should have listened to you on day one, because now what I realize that's keeping me back is this one thing. And it's like, well, you've already decided to take a class with me. I don't think it's time for you now to start to second guess everything that you've done. Frickin' roll on faith itself from the get-go, and I think you'll be fine. Because think like the test maker says, basically ask yourself 3 key questions of sorts. Why is the correct answer correct? Everybody should ask that question. Why is the incorrect answer incorrect? This is a good question now. I think in the world of verbal, this is absolutely essential. Like, yeah, I get why the correct answer is correct, but I got to start figuring out why the wrong ones are wrong. If that doesn't even cross my mind as I suppose, a moment of interest, there's a problem. But that ain't even where the great test takers, these are just the good ones. The great ones start to emerge on this last point. I get why it's incorrect, but why the F is it so damn tempting? Like, what was it about that answer choice that made me pick it? What was it about that answer choice that almost made me pick it? Thankfully I didn't, but I spent freaking 45 seconds of my life that I'm never getting back, and damn it, I can't afford to do that again. That's where I need to start to focus my attention as I start to move through this journey. So, like, these are kind of questions that you're going to start to realize I'm going to be asking you routinely. Because this is how I start to get to the top of that pyramid. Again, some of you who are retaking this course, shit, maybe you forget the retakes. Even if I just talk about people that are taking the test a second time. So you haven't taken the course, you've self-studied or you've done other courses or whatever, and now you're doing this. A common mistake that many people make is they just try to memorize questions, meaning when they do them and they memorize solutions, and then they don't they're incapable of applying them to a new question. And every single time they see a new question, like, wow, that's a spanking new question. It's like, no, it ain't. These idiots at GMAC aren't that creative. They come up with a handful of great questions and they keep recycling them all. And as you start to get really good and you start to think like the test maker and you start to understand the ins and outs of these questions, you start to realize this is like just a prototype, just repeated multiple times. And asking these questions helps you get there. So notice what it says. It says knowledge is the base. You gotta know. Again, I'm not gonna lie and be like, oh, you don't need to know shit. No, you need to know a hell of a lot in here to do well. But it's just a base for a test that assesses, ultimately, what you can do with it. And of course, top of the pyramid is where it's at. Now, some themes you're going to start to see emerge in the world of this test that the test maker uses to jack you. For example, abstraction. This is a good one. Like the quant side. Why is quant tough? It's basic math. It's because they know how to take basic math that you've always known and turn to math you've never seen, or at least seen that way. Like if I asked everyone in here, hey, can you add or subtract? Let's just run a quick poll and find out. My guess is half of you would say, yeah, of course I know how to add and subtract. A quarter of you would roll your eyes, sit out in silent protest going, what the F? And then maybe a quarter of you would log off this freaking lesson altogether and be like, this is a joke of a course. We're going to be talking about adding and subtracting? What a waste of my time and money. And I would agree with you in a sense, except the very first question of the first math lesson we do on Wednesday will just be an addition and subtraction question. And it's sad, but I'm going to be pretty damn happy if half of us get the question right. And it's just a basic addition subtraction question. So it's like, why the F are my standards so damn low that I'm going to be happy if half a class gets a question on basic addition and subtraction, right? Because they ain't just adding numbers anymore, because everybody knows how to add numbers. So then they just try to make it abstract. They say, hey, you know the concrete shit, let's instead try to make it abstract. Go over your head a little. Let's throw some symbols your way. Can you deal with a triangle and a freaking diamond, and can you add those? Now what's up? What's up is some of us start to panic. Some of us start to pee in our pants. Some of us just start to guess, and then we start to cry. And it's like, well, is that all necessary? I don't think so. Because at its core, this ain't a symbology test. I don't need to take a symbology prerequisite for this course. I just have to understand that yes, it's a quantitative test, but it's more importantly a reasoning test. And thus, if I can reason out how to add and subtract with numbers, why the hell can't I just add and subtract with maybe some symbols? I think I can do it. Take, for example, large or weird numbers. This test knows that if the numbers are simple and clean, we can probably do it. But if the numbers aren't, and they're ugly, and they're large, and they're weird, we'll probably can't. And it's like, well, so is that a problem? I don't know. Like the very first question we're going to do after this break coming up shortly is just a square root of a perfect square. Single digit, we can all do it. 2 digit, we can probably all do it. 3 digit, things get ugly. The very first question we're going to do is the square root of a 6-digit perfect square. And it ain't pretty. It's actually a very weird one. And in that case, then, some of us are going to want to spend, oh, that's a 3.5-minute question, right? It's like, no, it's more like a 3.5-second question. So wait a minute, it's a perfect square of a 6-digit number, and it ain't even pretty, but it's actually weird, and you tell me we could do that in 3.5 seconds? It's like, yeah, damn straight, because this ain't a math test, it's a reasoning test. And you have to start to realize that. In fact, you know what's kind of interesting of sorts, and some of you are well aware of this already, is that there are 2 types of people that end up sucking it up on the world of quant, especially as the questions get harder. Definitely the poets, obviously they count on their fingers and toes back in college. It's tough to kind of start to turn that around in a short amount of time, and thus when the questions get really tough, they crumble. But it's also the people we least expect, all the engineers in the crew, all the hardcore finance guys who just do math in their sleeve, mathematicians, so on and so forth. Because they can't effing reason. They just know how to do stuff through brute force. And it's funny to see the mighty fall because they don't appreciate what this test is about. And again, it's so important we start to realize that very early on, folks. This is not a math test, it's a reasoning test. Hey, Roy, my man, you are the only honest guy here to say as much. Trust me, and you guys will quickly start to see. It's dime a dozen, man. I'd be so damn rich if every time I got an engineer in the crew who tells me, man, I thought quant was going to be my strong suit. What the F? I'm so good at verbal, I can barely talk, to my cubicle mate. But it's like, damn, I guess I'm a verbal god. And it's like, no, you just are overcomplicating the quant. And so we'll talk much more about how to make things easier in here. Take, for example, on the verbal side of things, selling the wrong answer, hiding the right answer. They know how to screw you guys. It's misdirection. They know how to give you what you want. Maybe in sentence correction, it's all about verb tense. You see a bunch of shit in the past tense, so you think, oh, boom, it's got to be past, and they give you a past, and then you pick the past, and it's wrong. Now your dreams of scoring in the freaking 99% are officially in the past, because that was a universal condition, perhaps. It should have been in the present. Even though everything else was in the past, that can't change. But they screwed you, because they gave you what you thought you wanted. Or even hiding the right answer is another great trick they use. Say in critical reasoning, they know that we're pressed for time. They know we have to beat the timer to beat the test, and thus they know that sometimes we cut corners, and cut corners means sometimes we skim. Sometimes we don't even read the answer choices. And thus if they throw a few words at the beginning of an answer choice that looks irrelevant to you, you're like, F this, it can't be right. I'm out of here. But the actual reality is it was right. They just hid it behind irrelevant looking language, and they got you hot off their trail. Oh well, bummer. So you start to see, again, some of these traps that they use and tricks that they have up their sleeve are tired, man. They use them over and over. And if I'm focusing my attention on not at the bottom of the pyramid what I need to know, shit, not even what I need to be doing, which is good, but instead what I need to be looking out for, that's how I crush this test. And that's where, again, I need you guys to be thinking. So to succeed on the GMAT, you're going to need to do these three things, folks. It's non-negotiable. Those lessons are going to provide all of that. And by lesson, I mean in a general sense. Obviously, I ain't talking skill builder in here. But their books are, your videos are, office hours are. Now, your natural inclination is to focus on skills and content, but you can't do that. Now, for a fact, I know there are people in here right now that are saying to themselves, I'm with you, man. The guy that just wants to focus his attention on the skill builder is an idiot. I'm going to come to class every single week and soak up everything you got to say, man. I'm all in. It's 99 or bust. But that skill builder that you talk about, I don't really got time to do it. Because I got a crazy work life. I work like 80 hours a week. I got freaking a demanding wife, demanding husband. I got like 6 kids. I got a crazy social life. And dude, I'm a gym rat and I'm in there 7 nights a week. So as a result, skill builder, not so much. But I will come to class every single time, perfect attendance award, and I will soak up everything you gotta say. Sweet? No, you're an idiot too, because you will not have a base for what you need. I will tell you right now, there will be countless things that are going to go right over your head in here. Because again, I'm not here to handhold anybody. I'm not going to assume that I'm teaching to the slowest guy in this class. I'm going to presume right off the bat you've come to class and you've crushed the skill builder. And even people that crush the skill builder, they often find themselves watching these videos a second or third time. And on the second or third time, they'll email me and be like, damn, dude, I totally missed that the first time. Or shit, even the second time. But dude, that was a phenomenal takeaway there that I totally should have seen. And I was like, okay. These lessons are dense, and I can tell you right now, you will get the most out of them by putting the most into them. I can't stress that enough. All right, with that then, I want to be done with this first hour. I want to now get into this classroom real quickly, and then I'll introduce myself. I'll ask Megan to introduce herself, and then I'll ask you guys to introduce yourselves. So first things first, if you came to class a little bit ahead of time, you were sitting, hey, better late than never, Kyle. If you came to class, speaking of being on time, if you came to class on before time officially started, then you would have seen that you were placed in a waiting room of sorts. And it will have a message for me just saying, hey, sit back, you know, class starts at 4 o'clock here in LA. So as a result, we'll let you in when we let you in, essentially. When you get let into the classroom, that means everything is live. Everything is live. I'm not live, but everything else is live. So that means the video feed that you see right now, including the smartboard, should be in this box that you're watching me on. If it's not there, that means you just need to log out, log back in. Usually it's there. If it's not, 1 or 2 times, get it there. That's the way this operates. You don't ever need to worry if the stream is live when you log in. If the class has started, meaning if you're in this classroom, it's going. That's because in the time that you're sitting in that green room waiting of sorts, Megan and I were testing lighting, audio, video, sound, technology, recording, like all this stuff is being tested. So thus, that's why you're waiting. But once we got it all operational, we let you in, typically a few minutes early. I try to get it done about 5 minutes ahead of time, sometimes a little late, but either way, if you're ever let into the classroom, you are good. Know that. You guys were pretty good today about if you have tech problems, trying to just hit up Megan. I just want to be clear again, it can be pandemonium. Like I said, I run a pretty tight ship in here. If that's not for you, that's okay. I'm sure call customer service tomorrow, they'll find you another class. But I can't stand people that can't follow basic instructions. And so one of the basic instructions that I have is real simple. If you have tech problems, don't talk about them in the main chat. If you have tech problems, just talk about it via private chat, because frankly, no one really cares about your personal tech problems. That's the sad but true reality. We have a group class here. We got to keep it moving. I ain't slowing down because one guy can't get a feed. It's not the way it's going to work here. So that's the first thing I want to be clear about. And you guys were pretty good about that. But anytime you have a tech problem, I think solving it quickly by logging out, logging in does a trick. But if it doesn't, hit up Megan via private chat. She'll try to help you. But also acknowledge some limitations in that. Megan works for Veritas. Megan does not work for Adobe. Megan's pretty good at freaking a million different things. But she can only go so far on the Adobe tech support tip. So as a result, like, if she can't help you, then you're gonna have to deal with Adobe at some point, or Veritas customer tech support themselves. So that's that. The main chat room, there we go. But Steven, let's be honest, dude. It isn't like the first rule of IT anyways, just to log out and log back in, or turn off and turn on. So I will save you the private chat reboot. Yes, there you go. So I will save you the first pass. So if we can't get that done, then feel free to private chat Steven as well. I love it. So that's the first thing I want to say. Now, as far as the chatting is concerned, I hope that wasn't midway through while you were in air, Megan, on the reboot tip. But if it was, God, I'm glad you survived to tell about it. So the one thing I will say is the main chat is where we will do like 99% of our communication. So if you have questions, that's where you ask them. If you have answers, that's where you provide them. If you have comments, that's where you make them. The main chat is where it's at. Now, a couple basic ground rules for the main chat. There are ground rules. Like I started saying at the beginning of class, if you're going to ask a question in the main chat, and it's during class, meaning not during a break. During a break, all's fair game. Ask whatever you want, because it ain't going to F with me. But if it's when I'm up here talking and you want to start asking questions that ain't on the screen, that's a problem. And I just want to be clear about that. So if you already know you're that guy who just wants to ask whatever you want to ask, whenever you want to ask, this ain't the class for you. I will not have tolerance for that. It's going to F up the teaching that I'm trying to do here. So my simple request is just ask about whatever's on the screen. Real simple. Now, that being said, two questions you can never ask me, even if it's what's on the screen. One, what level question is that? My only response to that is, what does it matter? You're an idiot. You're not trying to learn what you should be learning. You're not here to game the system. Who cares if you can get one question right? That's a 99% of question. My 4-year-old daughter can do that. You should be instead focused on trying to learn, and you'll quickly start to see in here, I don't care actually about questions in here, and I don't actually even care about a lot of answers in here. I care much more about our ability to start to scale this up when the stuff is going to get tough. And if all I'm doing is focusing on any given question and what level difficulty it is, I'm never going to get the stuff that's tough, so oh well, I don't want to see that. So never ask that, and I kind of commented a little bit on that in my email welcoming to this course. But the second thing is, don't ever ask me also to repeat myself, because that's just rude. Meaning, everybody else is paying attention, this shit's recorded, and this is a group class. So just because you missed it because you were busy doing God knows what, sucks to be you. So all you need to do on your little notepad is say, oh, wait a minute. crap, at like 5:04, I wanted to ask him to repeat himself, but then I kind of heard him say something about that. All I need to do now is rewatch the video, fast forward to an hour and 4 minutes into the clip, and then boom, I'll hear me say myself, hey, don't ask me to repeat. Just again, these are simple, basic rules that given the technology that we've got, it'll carry this thing so much better as an experience for all of us. Now, that said, if you want to ask me a different question than those two, and you want me to answer it, do me a solid and throw my name at the front of the question. And that's because I'm sitting here trying to multitask. And when I'm trying to multitask, I'm obviously trying to give you this presentation that's here. I'm, of course, giving you my own spiel on things that are not here. I'm, of course, reading your comments as they're starting to come down. But also, there's a fourth chat window, or a second chat window that you can't see. That's from Megan, and she's given me all sorts of information as well. And so thus, I'm sitting here trying to juggle like a bunch of eggs in my hand, and I'm just hoping not to freaking crack all four on the floor. So if you're going to ask me a question and you want me to respond while I'm on air, you throw my, it could be that too, you could throw the question with my name at the front and make it relatively idiot-proof. Because assume for all practical purposes I'm an idiot, so if you can make it idiot-proof so I can understand it when I just read it on the first go, I'll tackle it. If instead I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean by mostly, Megan? Like, does mostly mean like more than 50%, or does it mean like 99%? Like, can you clarify that a little bit more for me? And Megan, of course, she sits there and she doesn't type with her fingers. She's got this fancy way of typing with her nose, and next thing you know, it's taking us all like an hour for her to type out what she meant by mostly, wasting all of our damn time. It ain't gonna happen. So at that point, I'll be like, Megan, I don't even, if I'm even gonna do this, I'll be like, Megan, I don't even understand what mostly means. Just hit me up via chat. I'm happy to talk about it. And sometimes I won't even respond because I'll be like, I don't even know what that means. I'm just keeping going with the flow that I've got. Now, that does not mean I won't ever answer your question. That means that simply, if you want, just hit me up via private chat. When I'm not on camera, I'm always on my computer. I'm always typing away, and I'm happy to talk about things there all the damn time. Now, sometimes you might ask a question, and that I might let it just kind of hang there. And I remember someone was asking a question about pacing, but I'm like, I'm in the middle of this. I want to just get this done. And Megan will sometimes just jump on questions as well. So if you ever feel like, you want follow-up, always feel free. That's the beauty of this class, folks. Way better than in person, and I've taught both. Because you have basically one-on-one communication that's available with an instructor via private chat at all damn times if you want. So I think you should learn to take advantage of that. All right, so that's the main chat. I've kind of communicated what I want. Now, as to private chat, Megan gives you the instructions at the beginning of every lesson on how to do it. You just want to just private chat with an individual. You go up to the top there and you select it. If you have iPad, or I don't know, some of these iOS devices, I don't think it works. Like, yeah, but I don't really know the specifics of it all. I'm not a tech guy, unlike my boy Steven. So as a result, like, just, get on some sort of damn laptop or computer, ideally, when you're in this class. It's not too much to ask. But then you just private chat to an individual, and then what happens is it pops up as a flashing orange tab next to the Everyone tab. And then whoever's trying to chat with you, you'll see their name. So I'll chat a hell of a lot in here. But before you know it, we're going to start to hopefully develop some relationships in here where you guys are private chatting even with one another. Public chatting, private chatting. So just be on the lookout there. So that's the chat scenario. Underneath the chat is the polling feature. We will be using the polling feature all the damn time. Today, less so. Starting Wednesday, all the damn time. And the poll is really the place we're going to use to get your thoughts on questions in terms of how you would tackle a question. Meaning, here's a question, knock yourself out, let me know what you think is the answer, so to speak. I want to be clear on that, because sometimes you have people that take classes like this, and I'm not sure why, but they really get off on being the guy who just wants to show the world how smart he really is. ignoring for a split second that he's retaking the class, so he failed it the first time, and on top of which, some of these questions aren't that effing tough. So why the hell are you sitting here spoiling it for the rest of us? Don't be that guy. In fact, let me be clear right now. Again, I have very low tolerance for people that are disruptive. So if you have that need to volunteer your opinion to questions that have never even been asked of you, don't take this class. It will not work. I will ask you tons of questions starting in the next hour. But the general rule, the absolute rule is don't answer a question you haven't been asked. And that includes, hey, a question pops up, and some people will be like, hey. It's like, what the fuck? Who even asked you? Like, let's slow our roll. Some people will be like, oh, I did it like this. It's like, what the hell? Who asked you? Last time I checked, I think we're taking a class with Megan and me, not a class by you, Mr. 520 on the test. And so the one thing that I'm going to say to you is, again, I'm going to ask you plenty of questions all the damn time. Sometimes I'll ask you, how did you do this? But until that happens, hey, just bear with me. Just again, these are simple rules, and you might wonder, like, damn, why is he talking about so many rules? Because I can tell you right now how many times you have just one or two idiots that ruin it for everybody. And I just want to try to head that off at the pass right now. I hate kicking people out of class, but I'm not afraid to do it. Again, life's too short. Okay, so I just want to comment on that. Now, that said, like I was talking about the poll. So like right now, we have a poll. It's asking for your GMAT target score. So Megan, can we open the poll now, please? So if we open the poll, what that does for you is it gives you an opportunity to answer. So now, go ahead, get in the poll. Let me know what you want to score on this test. Nobody knows in this class what you're bubbling right now. Megan and I will know, because we could peek into the poll at any time that we want to see how are people bubbling, so on and so forth. Generally speaking, I'll give you time on the question to answer it. The timer will be above my head. We use the timer all the damn time. If that timer starts to freak you out, all you got to do is cover it up with a Post-it note. On test day, you have a timer. On test day, you can hide the timer. Whatever you want, it doesn't matter. Now, after the timer, by the way, when the timer is open, does not mean the poll is always open. We open the polls whenever we freaking want, meaning typically towards the end of a question. Why? Because a lot of idiots are gunners, and not good gunners, just really bad ones. You know, they want to shoot first, ask questions later, and they want to be on that solid road to the 520. And thus, what they do is they'll spend, I'll give 2 minutes on a question, they'll spend 40 seconds on it, and boom, there's my answer. And it's like, okay. You do realize we're still going to wait around for a minute 20, even though Your Royal Highness apparently got the wrong answer already. Why do that? Patience. There's no prize for being first in the poll, folks. The prize is for being right in the poll. And thus, take your time, work it out. And a lot of times, that takes more effort than a lot of you are willing to put forth. So we kind of try to train you at least to have a little bit more of a ask questions first and then shoot later mentality. And so we'll open the poll whenever we open the poll. I do not need any reminders from anybody that the poll is not open. Sometimes people, again, said wannabe gunners that can't follow directions, like, oh, the poll's not open. You need to open the poll. No, you need to just focus on the question. I got a TA, I don't need a second one. So let's just be clear on that. Now, after I come back up here, because I'll be off camera when I'm having you do questions, you guys will hear my voice a little bit. So even if you've covered up the poll, the timer above my head, then you should be hearing my voice and then know, crap, I got to get in the poll. The poll is important to get into. Because if everybody who's in the poll gets a question right, I'm going to skip the question. I want to be clear on that. I'm not even going to tackle the question. Why? Because I always welcome the opportunity to take a quick break on my voice. I talk a hell of a lot in here, so the opportunity I can, great. Plus, why do I need to beat a freaking dead horse into the ground? Like, if we all know how to do the question, who cares? Let's move on. Now, it doesn't happen too frequently, but it does happen every once in a while. I'm thrilled when it does. Now, some of you will say, but shit, I didn't know how to do that question. That's why I didn't get into the poll. I'm going to say to you, sucks to be you, again. Because Because my only ask of you, if you're going to take my class, is, again, you play by my rules. And my rules are very simple. You come to class prepared, you come to class ready to participate. If you can't do either, just don't come to class. Now, I don't feel so bad if I skip a question, because I know that I'm not your only source of learning in here. In fact, as great as I think my classes are, the money that you spent has already paid for itself multiple times with all the resources you have, including but not limited to the on-demand videos from Brian, all the practice tests, all the freaking thousands of homework questions, every single day office hours for 2 hours where you can ask some instructor any question that's on your mind. Like, shit, man, me, 36 hours here, this is nothing. But I want to be clear, I think it has a hell of a lot of value. And so if you can't even bother to get your ass on the poll, I don't really have much concern for you. Now, that being said, if you say to me, no, dude, I did get in the poll. I'm just a good freaking guesser. And thus, I got it right, but I don't know how to do it. Can you explain it? Happy to. If you're in the poll and you want me to talk about it, happy to. Even if we get 100, I'm happy to. But if you ain't in the poll, don't even ask. I won't even do it. Now, why is that important? In the world of verbal, I will not talk about just the correct answer. That's nice and all, but as I already talked about, it's so much more to talk about why is it incorrect and why is it tempting. But honestly, I don't have the time to talk about 5 wrong answers on every single question. We'll go through like 5 questions in here if that's the case. So my hope is a lot of us, all of us will start to realize, like, yeah, A is a dog shit answer. Who would ever pick A and not even pick it? If no one picks A, then I don't have to talk about it, just for the sake of focusing on the things that are more pressing. If, however, you're that guy who wants to pick choice A and you didn't, but you want to talk about it, and all of a sudden you don't pick it and no one else picked it, and now all of a sudden you're like, hey, can you talk about why A is wrong? The answer is like, no, dude, get your ass in A if that's where you want it to be. Or private chat Meg and private chat me, so on and so forth. But if someone's in A, I'm happy to talk about it. That's my commitment to you every single class. So that's the poll. Now, before I start talking about a question, we will lock the poll. So like right now, we're going to lock the poll. Everyone's got a chance to get into the poll, and we do that because of said gunners. Again, there are some gunners that'll be like, yeah, A is a dog shit answer. And all of a sudden, their fragile ego can't handle it, and they move from A to B. And it's like, what the F? This is a stupid GMAT class. No one even freaking knows that you picked A. Who cares? Except me and Megan, and the more we know, the better we can help you. So we lock the poll to preserve poll integrity. And then at the end of a question, we will broadcast the poll. So now we'll broadcast the results so that you can get a sense of how the rest of the class looks. Now, if you notice here, we got about 30% saying, dude, it truly is 99 or bust for me. Great. We got about 60% saying, hey, dude, I ain't up there, but I'll be happy with a 7-something. Solid. I'm happy to see that. 90% of you are here with some great aspirations. Now, notice here, it looks like I'm hoping it's a fat finger error, but maybe it's not because it was in there for a while as I was eyeballing it. Some of you want a 500 to a 590. My guess is maybe one person. I'll be honest, this is not going to be the class for you. I will probably run you over. Now, if you want to readjust your expectations and you're willing to put in the time and effort, great. But this is probably going to go over your head. That's just, again, straight up. Hey, you'll quickly see here. Again, I don't pull punches. I'll tell it to you with brutal honesty always. Now, to that second subgroup, the 600 to 690. If you are on the 610 side of things rather than the 690 side of things, this might be a rough course for you. Again, I'm not here to teach to the slowest guy. I've got 90% of us saying, hey, I want a 7-something, which is huge. I like to teach with it's 99 or bust. That's the way I like to think. But hey, I can indulge a 700 or a 710 any day of the week. But I just want to be clear here. And you know, I got one of my best reviews, I feel like, the other day from someone who said, hey, you know, this guy Ravi's class isn't necessarily for everybody. Like, if you want a 6-something, maybe he's not for you. And I take that as a compliment. You want a 7-something, hey, this is where we get business done. But maybe if I want a 610, this might not be right for me either. So again, there are some things I just want to be very clear and upfront about. I always want people to be happy with the choices they're making, and I try to give you as much informed information, I suppose, as I can at the outset. Okay, so that's all I want to say about the poll. I don't think I have anything else I really want to add as far as kind of do's and don'ts and rules and regulations. Like I said, this first hour sucks because I have a lot of lecture to do, but after this it's a hell of a lot more interactive. But at the same time, please understand that first hour is the most important hour for the rest of the journey, and that's because you have to really understand what this test is all about. And if right now you still don't realize that this is a reasoning-based test where you're rewarded for thinking on a high level, you just freaking missed the entire first hour and its entire purpose. So rewatch it when the video posts. All right, with that then, let me get into a quick introduction on myself. As I said, my name is Ravi. I am your instructor. My email is ravi@veritasprep.com. Everybody who is enrolled in my class as a student has an email from me welcoming you to the course, and I sent you guys a nice, every week if I get a nice story from a student or two, I'll forward them out. So you should also have a nice little success story that came my way. And also, hopefully you read it and started to realize it's a theme I'm going to hammer home in here big time, so it may be a bit premature for you guys because you haven't been in the game with me yet, but respect is something I hammer home. If you don't have it in your inbox, email me. Don't chat me in here. Don't even tell Megan in here. Just email me and tell me. But I'm telling you right now, it's always there. I know some of you have created like just special, Veritas accounts just for, Gmail accounts for this class. Great. Check that shit. It ain't going to be in your regular account because obviously you created a separate spam account for this. That's fine. I encourage you all, though, immediately add me to your safe sender list because I send out emails at least 2 times a class and often more depending on what information I'm getting and so on. And plus, if you ever email me and I respond back, you want to make sure it doesn't get filtered. So if it's not in your inbox and it's not in your spam folder, and I sent it out Friday morning at the crack of dawn, and then like maybe 5:30 or 6 Pacific. Here again today, I sent it out at like 5:30 or 6, and then right before class at like 3:55 or whatever, I saw I had a few new ads, immediately sent it out. And I saw also a couple emails from some of you. I will respond to all my emails. I typically check and respond to emails Friday mornings, and anytime you send me an email, you'll automatically get an auto response saying as much. And plus, if it's about content, I won't ever even respond. There's something that already tells you to hit up office hours. And I'll comment more at the end of class, I suppose, on that. So that's my name. You know how to reach me if you need me. I was born and raised here in LA. I went to school up at Berkeley, did the Haas undergrad business program. Then I came back down to LA. I went to law school at USC, practiced law for 5 years. Then I decided to go back to business school, applied to one school, got into one school up the street at UCLA Anderson, went there on a full ride. But I'm also Go Bears as well as Go Bruins. So I've got split personality here, Jacob. But the one thing that I will say to you is I was super involved on campus, club president, student ambassador, socially super active. So I graduated in 06, started working for Veritas in 07. This is all I do, teaching and tutoring. I've taken a lot of tests. I worked with a lot of students. Everything I say, you should take it as fact. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. It will go well for you if you do. If you have questions about Haas, you have questions about the JD tip, if you have questions about Anderson, feel free to ask. I'm happy to share. Always, I love to provide advice. I never explain content via email. And in fact, I just shared with Megan an email the other day. Some girl was asking me, like years later, about like her workplace environment and people talking. And when I say this, like I genuinely do love to give people opinions. You can ask me about anything. I'm always happy to share. Lawyers, we have opinions on everything. All right, that's all I want to say here about me. So now I want to get into our first break. It's a little late, but I think we'll slowly start to catch up maybe. Here's what I want to know from you. I would like it in a paragraph form. That way it's easy to read. It's friendly to read. Please do not be that guy who just bullet points me. Like if you're already bullet pointing me now, like I don't have a hell of a lot of interest in freaking getting to know you and teach you, and more importantly, I don't have high expectations you'll be able to do anything well. Remember, this is a 6-week class. My hope is we are all getting to know each other. And it starts right here, because hell, why we go to business school? To get to know people at some point. It's all about networking, so let's start the process here. First off, let me know if you have a preferred name. Sometimes you do, sometimes you know. So maybe Jacob wants to be called, you know, Tommy Trojan Jacob. I don't know. Maybe he just wants to be called Tommy, not even Jacob. Tommy T. If Jacob wants to be called Tommy T, then Jacob just got to say, hey, nah, all right, fair enough. We'll go with the name your mama gave you. So in this case, but if he did, he'd say, hey, listen, I'm Jacob, but please call me Tommy T. Then in that case, what I'll do is I will then ask customer service to change Jacob's name to Tommy T. That way when on Wednesday, I won't remember Wednesday, but on Wednesday when he pops up, he'll say Tommy T. And I'll be like, all right, sweet, Tommy T, let's do this. So if you got a preferred name, let me know. But if you don't and Jacob's like, nah, I'm good, you don't need to tell me your preferred name because I can see your preferred name. Now, if you got a name that is hard to pronounce, consider me an idiot, give me a phonetic spelling on it, you know. So if I saw, you know, not like the Key and Peele sketch, like Aaron, you know, but if I have a tough time, then if I'm gonna have a tough time, like if it's even a remotely tough name, if you break it down phonetically, it makes it a lot easier. Because obviously I don't have the luxury of hearing you tell me your name. I'm pretty good with names, but dude, I'm an idiot for all practical purposes. So, preferred name, let me know if you got one. Otherwise, tell me where you're at. Some of you are right here in LA, down the street. Some of you are on the opposite side of the world. Okay, tell me where you're at. Why is that important? Because some of us are going to be study grouping together. And if you ain't trying to make friends and try to study group in here, you're not taking advantage, man. No one wants to be on this journey by themselves. It's much better when you have others in the mix. And that starts with a class like this, but it quickly, outside of class, becomes all about study groups. Sometimes we're in the same physical location. Sometimes we're in the same time zone. It's important to take advantage. This is an online class after all. I know it's kind of a mind-blowing thing to think about. Oh, I could study online too? Of course. Tell me where you went to school, what you did. Are you one of those poets? Are you one of those engineers? You go to school at Berkeley? You go to school at SC? What's your deal? Tell us, you know. I'm curious to know. Tell me what you do. I love networking. And I always throw away mad free tutoring if it tickles my fancy. I want some Universal Studios tickets right now for my little girls. And I love hospitality. So yeah, tell me what you're up. And if you can help me finish building my damn house, tell me that. I'm happy to help you. Finally, where do you want to go to school? You know, some of you, of course, are going to give the diplomatic, I don't know yet, I got to see where my score is at. And it's like, that's fair. But look, are you considering top 10 programs? Are you considering my mail order MBA program where you just got to give me a check and I'll cash it and then you get a degree? So at some point, it's good to know because we're going to be able to bounce, I don't know, brainstorming ideas for essay topics off one another if we're starting to meet up outside of class, of course. All right, that's all I got to say here, folks. Let's take our first break of the day. I will read all these chat comments, introductions, after class. I've private chatted a few of you. I could see already some of you have private chatted me back, so I'll get to those right now. You guys, when the videos post, will not have these chat comments there. However, you can copy and paste them all right now as people are starting to do them. So maybe at the end of this first break, then you could do that and you could read them at your leisure. But that's all I gotta say. So yeah, please don't be one of those lurkers who doesn't participate. I hate you. Why are you here? So let's put 5 on the clock. Let's get to know one another. Let's talk when the break is up. All right, guys, let's slowly get back to work here. I appreciate all the introductions that are starting to come through. And I got a few via private chat as well. So definitely, if you gave me one via private chat, I asked some of you to send it to the main chat room. That way we can all read and all get to know. And even if you're a trial student, I want to know who you are. You know, especially because some of you will be in the classroom, if not this one, on the next one, and so on. So I do like to be invested. The more I know, the better. Let me just say it that way, because then I care. Because I'll be honest with you, if I don't know you, then I don't care about you, and then don't be surprised if you know, you don't hear from me as often as I like to say. Like I said, you will get out of this whatever you put into it. All right, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into this next section, guys. I'm going to read all these things, like I said, after class, so I appreciate you sharing them. And by the way, if you did not get your introduction in, fret not. We will hopefully have another break in a little bit. We'll see how I'm doing on time. And in that case, then you can kind of jam in an introduction at that point. So I do want to get into now just a few question types of sorts so we can start to see how this test will actually look. Some of this stuff might already be fairly familiar, but a quick breeze through never hurts. So start with problem solving. You know, like I said, this is a classic classic math question type. Here's the math question. Here are 5 answer choices. Go to town, knock yourself out. It's not complicated at all as a question type. But they do start to make it more complicated by doing little shit like this. So it's like, well, what is the square root of not a pretty number, not a small number, but instead a weird and large one? Now, if you think about what a square root is, it's just about what times what equals what's underneath the radical. Now, this question right now, some of us are going to look at it like this. And if you look at it this way, you're going to start to realize this is a freaking hard question. But here's the best part. It doesn't look this way. This question actually looks like this. In which case, then, this is a freaking ridiculously easy question. So right there, some of you are going to start to have your minds blown, because you're going to say, what the F? It's the same damn question. You didn't do shit. You scribbled and you unscribbled. So really, what's going on? And I'd say to you, fundamentally, one thing that 99ers know how to do is leverage their assets. And you know what assets you have in front of you are these answers. Answers are assets, folks. And so let me be clear right now. If you're one of these guys who likes to look at the answers after you've done a question, you're on the road to mediocrity. If instead you're one of these guys that says, I'm a 99er, damn it, like 30% of us are, or I'm on the road to the 99 as 60% more of us are, so a full 90% are on that 700 plus path, I'm not looking at the answers at the end. Only the idiots do that. I'm going to look at the answers from the get-go and always midway through. Then you start to realize some best practices that we have. And so when you look at a question like this from the get-go, you could say to yourself, well, so now I have my answers. All I got to do is multiply this times this to see if it's that, this times this to see if it's that, and so on and so forth. But I can tell you this right now, my guess is not one single person in here can do this in their head. Instead, you're going to resort to some long multiplication on your paper. And what I'd say to you is long multiplication is for losers. If you find yourself doing long multiplication on this test, I can guarantee you right now you're not doing something correctly. And that's because this test does not reward brute force math. It's not a math test. It's a reasoning test. And for a brute force math move, I don't get very highly rewarded. Meaning, yes, I get this question right, and then I convince myself I did it the right way until I realize I spent 2.5 minutes on a question, or shit, even 2 minutes as I'm celebrating, when I should have spent only about 10 seconds at most on it. And that's how you start to get your ass handed to you on this test. So question for you. This is what I will call a human calculator type question, because it rewards those of us that are human calculators. If I refuse to do the long multiplication because I'm not a loser, what tools, and I would argue there are 2 tools that I could use. Again, I don't care about answers in here. I care about process. What tools would you use to start to eliminate some of these answers and start to get to the right answer on a question like this, folks? What do you think here? What would you do? This is the point in the lesson where you don't let me die of old age and you actually do participate. Yes, awesome, awesome, awesome. So a lot of you guys are picking up very nicely on the units digits. Absolutely right. I think the units digit is absolutely critical. That's the number one tool I think you can use. But I think there's going to be a second tool that you can use as well. Because at the end, I have to look for something that squares up to be a 9. I like that some of you even went straight even or odd. I think that's great because only an odd number can get me to an odd. So anything that's even is automatically out. And then, of course, if I take it one step further and say, okay, a 3 squared is 9, 7 squared is 9, 3 squared is 9, so now I'm here, but then what do? I'm stuck here. Am I going to sit here and do long multiplication yet again? No. Great, Simran. I start to say, hey, man, why don't I start thinking about here maybe some approximation? And that, to me, is what you want to start to think about. You got two tools at your disposal, units, digits, and approximation, that anytime I start to deal with anything that remotely resembles human calculator type effort, I want to bust it out. So if you start to notice this number here, yeah, it's large, yeah, it's weird, but it's also awfully close to 160K. And of course, the square root of 16 is 4, so you almost are guaranteed an answer that's really close to 400. So you could kill choice A almost immediately as well. And now you have to make a choice. Is it going to be 397? Is it going to be 403? Well, it's time for new long multiplication. That's like, what? No. That would make me a loser. I'm not a loser. I'm a 99er. And I have to start to realize one thing about this test. There is no number by accident on this exam. Everything has an intelligent design or hidden beauty behind it. And thus, when I look at this 157,609, as some of you are correctly pointing out, you start to realize it's actually slightly less than 160. And thus, I need a number that's going to be slightly less than 400. I guess that's choice D for the win, and I'm done. Do I need to go and prove it and show my work? Hell no, this ain't 8th grade. They don't care how I got here. I could close my eyes, as my 4-year-old daughter could too, and just pick an answer. And if we're right, we're right. We move right on. And it's important to start to let that stubbornness that some of us have go. Now, some of you may say, damn, so you didn't do really any math? Well, kinda. I understand the math concepts well enough to appreciate the units digits. I understand the math concepts involving, hey, if a number's smaller, a number's bigger, how does that work? But am I doing any of the long multiplication? Hell no. This test is not a math test. It's a reasoning test. Now, of course, some skeptics in here might say, well, that's nice and all, dude, but why don't you talk to me about a real question like 393? What if 393 were on the board? Now what would you do? I wouldn't do shit because 393 would never be on the board. Think about what that would reward. We already went through what this test is all about. It's about higher order thinking. If I had to choose between 393 and 397, what's it showing? That I'm a monkey that knows how to multiply? That ain't what's going to get me to HBS on a full ride. And so there is a huge difference between a 403 and a 397 because it shows reasoning skills. 392 and 397 does not. And so as we start to think about how to tackle questions that may look intimidating at first, start to realize there are always going to be strategies available to us to make it a lot more user-friendly. So this is problem solving. Second type of question you see in the world of quant is data sufficiency. Like I suggested earlier, this is a tough type of question for many because it's unique. But we're going to spend the entire 4th week talking DS. It just wants to know if you have enough information to answer questions. They say, look, it's about resource management, and I think that's a nice little way to think about it. Like, you know, we're all in some form of work or another, or presumably have worked at some point or another, and it's like, hey, do you want to get stuff done? If so, do you use the right amount of resources to do it? You use too many, people ain't going to be happy. You use too little, you ain't going to get it done. So at some point, it's about doing it right. That's what DS is at its core. Now, there are two types of DS questions you will face, only two. One is what's called a yes-no question, one is called a specific value-based question. That means when a question is phrased in a way that elicits a yes or a no response. So if you take a step back, look at this question, it says, is x greater than 9? The answer to that question is not, oh, x is 17. Who gives two shits? The question is x greater than 9? You either say yes or no. That's it. Answer the damn question. So that's why this is called a yes or no question. Now let me be clear. The test does not care if the answer is actually yes. The test does not care if the answer is actually no. The test just wants to know, do you have enough info to give me an answer? That's the goal in data sufficiency. Now, this is what they call a question stem. Statement 1 and 2 are pieces of evidence. They are facts. Take them as true. And then evaluate each one to figure out whether you have enough information to answer the question being asked. These 5 answer choices are fixed. They will never change. In fact, make sure you memorize these in week 1. GMAC prints them one time in their official guides, meaning at the front of the DS section. They don't even bother wasting ink, paper, reproducing this over and over. Why is that important? If you find in week 2 you're reading these answer choices, you're effing up. You're wasting time on shit you shouldn't be wasting. This test is hard enough as it is. Why you want to take time away from what may be good stuff and just read answer choices, which are really low-level stuff? Now, these statements, it doesn't matter in theory where you start. You always start with the easier statement first, though. So then in theory, it does matter. You should start with what's easiest. Because here's the important thing. You're not going to always have as much time as you would like on every single question. Sorry to disappoint, but that's a fact. And as a result, some of us are going to have to guess. All of us are going to have to guess at some point or another. I can tell you right now, only the idiots guess 1 and 5. 99ers, we guess 1 and 2 or 1 and 3 consistently. And that's because we just put a little bit of effort into a question and we're able to get a whole lot out. And you'll start to learn, I've got, obviously the party line here is think like the test maker, but I have my own roguish strategies that I like to call think like the Vegas test taker, which that email from Friday referenced, and guys call me the Wolf of West Hollywood. And the idea there is like, hey dude, it's all about gambling. And so we start to realize that, like, hey, with a little bit of know-how and a little bit of lady luck gambling style, that we're going to start to learn how to guess and make good moves. But it starts with just a proper approach. So question for you, and this is not an opinion, this is a fact. What do you think, but I should really say what do you know, is the easier of the 2 statements? Is statement 1 easier to start with, or is statement 2? What would you say on this one? And I want to make sure we all agree here. And I want to make sure that we are all on the same page. Oh, frickin' IT guy. Dude, reboot, Bonner. Yeah, get out of here. No, it is definitely statement number 2. It's not even close. And I think at this point we all agree. Unless you're trying to be binary on me, and the 1 really means you're on, and 0 is you're off. But hell no, it is definitely 2. There you go. There, I'll take that. So in this case, you absolutely want to be all up in statement number 2. And it's exactly right, Nate, because who the hell wants to touch a quadratic? Nobody. Nobody. And again, this is where you start to realize with just basically 1 second, you can determine that statement 2 is sufficient. You don't got to do anything. Because remember, some idiot out there, not you because you're an executive, you're going to have analysts working for you, can sit there and solve for x. And he's going to get you the value. He'll be like, here, boss, here's the value for x. And at that point, you can then tell your board, is it greater than 9 or not? That's super sufficient as a result. I don't know what x is, nor do I care. And I think as a 99er, this is how you're supposed to start to think about it. You couldn't, I guarantee you, Jacob, there's absolutely 0 chance you could do statement 1 faster than any of us could do statement 2. So, and if you can, I don't know why you're here. That's the reality. That said, if I know statement 2 is sufficient, then what would I do? I'd look at my answer choices, because imagine again, I have no time left on the clock right now. I'd look at my answer choices and I'd say, hey, which of these answer choices can I start to eliminate? Well, look at what choice A says. Choice A says statement 1 alone is sufficient, but statement 2 alone is not. And that's like, what? We just decided statement 2 was sufficient, so choice A is out. B says statement 2 alone is sufficient, but statement 1 alone is not. And I don't know if the second part is true. This first part is clearly true. So I keep this on the board. Choice C says both statements together are sufficient, but neither alone is sufficient. And that's not true. I mean, I'm sure I could combine them now, because if one is good enough, then of course if I slap on some more resources, I could get the job done. But choice C is a bust because it's using too many resources. It's telling me neither alone is sufficient. That's patently false, so C is dead. D says each statement alone is sufficient. And I don't know if that's true. I do know that this is true, and that might be true here, so this stays on the board as well. And then I come to choice E, which says statements 1 and 2 together are not sufficient at all. So even if I combine them, I can't get the job done. It's like, what? No, I can get the job done even if I can combine them. So yeah, clearly choice E is out. So now I'm down to 50-50 B or D, and I could get there in exactly 1 second. So now I got to go to statement number 1. And statement number 1 now does require some effort, because what I have to basically do is say, hey, quadratics, this is coming attraction for next week, algebra. I have to set everything up equal to 0. Then I got to say, what are the factors of this that add up to that? So that would be an x plus 7. That would be an x minus 4. Then, of course, algebra says I got to set each parenthetical up to 0. So then I'd say that means x is ultimately equal to a negative 7 or a 4. And then now I have to go back and I have to say, hey, is it greater than 9 or not? And I'd be like, negative 7 is not. 4 is not. Now, do I know what x is in statement number 1? I have no effing clue. However, I do have a response. It's a guaranteed no. And since this is a yes-no question, I know the answer to their question is no. Therefore, it now becomes sufficient. And now I can get back into my answer choices and make my final choice. So all we had left were B and D. B says statement 2 alone is sufficient, but statement 1 alone is not. It's like, no, we just proved that statement 1 alone is, so choice B is dead. I guess D becomes my final answer, which says each statement alone is sufficient. And yep, that's indeed the case. So notice here we did basically 0 math on statement number 2. It's just the knowledge that we would get one unique value that would either be greater than 9 or not. It doesn't even matter. Super sufficient immediately. But statement number 2 had multiple values, and we had to go through this song and dance to figure out we got a definitive yes or a definitive no. Now, of course, if instead of negative 7 and 4 we had negative 7 and 14, where sometimes it's no and sometimes it's yes, then we don't know shit. Statement 1 would be out. B would have been the right answer. So things can change very quickly. So this is why statement 1 sucks compared to statement number 2. It comes down to the seconds. And if you don't appreciate what a second means, or 2 seconds means, or 3 seconds means on this test, you not only are not a 99er, but you ain't even on the road to one. And I want to make sure you realize that. You got to beat the timer to beat the test. And I can tell you right now, no 99er is ever happy with the performance he ever puts forth on a question, but instead is constantly asking himself, hey, how can I get better? How can I tighten that up even harder? And that's, I think, something you want to be thinking about. At least 30% of us should. 60 might as well. Now, notice here, I've circled a bunch of things on this. This is a very easy way to memorize these answer choices for week 1 and week 1 only. 1, 2, TEN, or 1 to 10. 1 alone, 2 alone, together, each not sufficient at all. That's what A, B, C, D, E represent. Beyond week 1, I never want to hear 1 to 10. 1 to 10 is the lowest level shit you could ever think about moving forward. For week 1, it's fair game, man. Let's just memorize these answer choices. But after week 1, we have to know these answer choices down cold. Now, some people like to do it in this AD, BCE, BD, ACE crap, and that's just what I said, crap as well. It's a crutch, and you don't need that crutch. If you're going to write something down, we'll talk about it in week 4 what I'm okay with writing down, and it ain't that. So as far as I'm concerned, between now and week 4, let's just get these answer choices down cold and know them moving forward. So this is a yes-no question. Now I want to shift gears here to the second type of question, which is a value question. What's a value question? It's something that asks for a value. So this one clearly screams out value. So here I wouldn't say, what is the value of x? Oh, yes. Huh? Oh, no. Huh? No, answer the damn question. The question's asking for a value, you give them a value. So that's what's sufficient. If you give them multiple values, clearly not sufficient. So, question for you. As we look at this, If I were to take a look at statement number 1, what conceptual mistake is someone likely to make on this? Again, forget sufficient, not sufficient. I don't care about that. This is a stupid question. But I want to start to think now about how other people are going to respond. So I don't start to do that. I want to see it coming a mile away. And I want to be trying to nail it so that I can avoid it. Exactly. Very, very nice. So you guys are picking up on, hey, all the asses in the world, they start to make those assumptions. They start to assume it's got to be an integer. Like, of course x has to be 4. And it's like, what? Why? Why has it got to be 4? It don't got to be 4. It could be 4.01. Exactly, Tony. So to me, nah, statement 1's a bust. Choice A, choice D, dead on arrival. And so again, if I had to guess right now, because this ain't question 3, but this is question 31, the last question of the day, I can't finish it out because I don't have the time. I know how to do it. I just don't have the time to do it because I effed up because I was dealing with some stupid trapezoid question earlier. Okay, I'm down to BCE. Boom, let's see what happens. I'm not guessing 1 and 5. I spend 1 second, realize this is garbage, and I move on. Now, of course, if I look at statement 2, what kind of mistake is someone likely to make there? How does someone eat it on this one? Again, forget sufficiency, not sufficiency. I don't care about that. I want to be thinking about conceptually how we get ruined. Yeah, good. So definitely you start to see the 2 values, but it's specifically, in this case, they forget that it could be the negative, right? Absolutely. So they just assume in a POS type move that it's got to be positive. Don't do that. Never assume, especially in data sufficiency. So clearly this could be a positive or a negative. Multiple values, definitely out. So statement 2 is dead. You're down to 50-50, C or E. So now what do? I combine my information. I know that x is between 3 and 5. I know that x is either 4 or negative 4. So clearly now I know what x is. Choice C becomes my final answer. Now, question for you. Let's say I change this question a little bit. If I were to say, what is the value of x where x represents the number of art projects that my wife bought my older daughter and younger daughter to work on at Michael's? What can you tell me about this number x, folks? So I like what you guys are starting to pick up on. So notice here a couple things. You guys are all correctly saying it's got to be an integer. And that's 100% correct. You can't go to Michael's and be like, I want half an art project. They're going to throw your ass out. But I do want to draw the distinction now what some of you are saying, which is very different. You're saying, hey, look, it's got to be positive. While some of you guys are saying, no. It's got to be non-negative. And that's a very important distinction. And so right now, if you're looking at this question and you're like, oh, this shit ain't hard, you're right. But you're just about to get schooled on something that's very important. Because maybe my wife didn't buy them anything at Michael's. Maybe I told her that Michael's is a ripoff. Unless you got one of those like coupons that they like spam you with all the damn time. And thus, she didn't buy anything. It's possible she got 0. And 0 is not positive. 0 is non-negative. So it's important you start to realize, for the purposes of this question, the answer would have become D, because this is the only non-negative number. This is the only integer it could have been. So D would have been the right answer. But for moving forward, I could tell you right now, 0 will probably kick you in the ass. So don't ever conflate positive and non-negative. They are very different. They're often the same. But of course, that 1, 0 will be the all-important differentiator. So, like to me right now, if I said positive, I am so excited. I don't look at it as like I just screwed up. I look at it as like, damn, dude, I just saved myself from making a costly mistake down the road. And that's what this learning process should be all about, guys. Okay, I want to shift gears here and get into the world of verbal. As I said earlier, the questions are split roughly third. So starting off with sentence correction, although we won't tackle sentence correction until week 4, just as a reminder. You know, it says it begs the word grammar, and I think that's true. I don't want to lie to you and be like, oh, you don't even know how to speak English and you could rock this test. Bullshit. You got to know English backwards and forwards, man. And it starts with some basic grammar principles. I do not envy any of you who are non-native speakers trying to take this test. Like, GMAT's already effed as it is hard enough. Then I got to take it in a language that ain't my own. Too tough. But hey, you signed up for it, so now you got to make it happen. Now, that being said, sorry, senor, but hey, like I said, yeah, you signed up for it, now I got to make it happen. So the one thing that I would say to you is spend some extra time with the skill builder. Obviously, here's the thing, right? I could sit here and I could actually try to master an English grammar primer, like 500 pages for the next 6 months of my life. That's what I'm going to do. And it's like, what? Do you have nothing better in your life? You don't got a job, you don't got kids, you don't got a wife or husband, you don't got friends, you don't got a gym to go to, like you don't got like an alcoholic problem, or I don't know, you like who the hell wants to spend this kind of time on a stupid grammar primer this big? Nobody. It doesn't make sense. And so what you're going to start to learn in here is I like to think I'm razor efficient with not only the way I like to process questions, but also how I like to teach, but also how I like to encourage my students to study. And I can tell you right now, it ain't by mastering a grammar primer this thick. They're out there. Knock yourself out if you got nothing better to do. But honestly, you got something better to do unless you're in the 90s on the quant and on critical reasoning and reading comp. So what you're going to find is the skill builder has a lot of grammar rules and principles. If you know that you suck at English grammar, start working on it yesterday. Like, this isn't a class where it's like, oh, let me just do things as they come, and then, of course, that's all I need. Like, what? If I know that I can't draw a triangle to save my life, I start working on it yesterday. Like, there are things that I got to start to acknowledge are shortcomings and deal with it, not get my ass handed to me in week 5 when I do geometry and learn, like, oh, that's how you do a triangle? No. But what you start to realize is it's also about logic. Because again, come back to what some of us are going to want to do. We're going to want to memorize. I just got to know a lot of rules, right? I got to just memorize idioms. I found a great website. It's got 50 pages of idioms. You're an idiot. Like, think about what this test is about. You want to be down here or you want to be up there? 90% of you said you want to be up here. How the hell then is memorizing and perhaps understanding what you memorize going to get you there? It's not. This is why I'm telling you that first hour is the most important hour, because it just tells me what I need to be doing, how I need to be doing it, I should say. And so what we talk about in week 4 when we do sentence correction is strategy. Now, am I going to lie to you and tell you, oh yeah, the Veritas Skill Builder is everything you need to know? No. But I'd rather go short than go long. And the reason for it is because every time I get a question wrong between now and test day, I look at it as just another opportunity to learn. And so I think the Veritas Skill Builder does a damn good job of getting you the basics. And the reality is, most of us probably have a decent understanding, because if we already signed up for a class like this, you probably can communicate relatively well. And so as a result, you just need to kind of learn to dot your I's and cross your T's. Well, you do that with a little bit of trial by fire. So this is what a sentence correction question looks like. It's got a sentence. Your job is to correct it. Now, sometimes you ain't going to correct it because it's correct. You pick choice A, always, in that case. Because A is the same exact thing as the original. B through E are 4 variations of the original. Now, what they do is they underline a portion. Sometimes they underline the whole thing. If they underline the whole thing, your luck's run out, essentially. Those sentences suck. But when they underline just a portion, they're, I don't want to say pretty easy, but they're a hell of a lot easier than the whole thing being underlined. Now, instinctively, we may think, oh yeah, so we just start with the original sentence, start reading it, and think about, like, what's the best way I would write or phrase it? What the F is the matter with you? That ain't efficient. Hell no. Instead, what you do is you start with our strategy that we call decision points. And decision point says, hey, get your ass into the answers. Remember, answers are assets? Start there. Step 1. And you scan those answers for obvious differences. And the differences are going to be ones that fall into what we call our impacts model. It categorizes basically everything you're going to see on sentence correction to 7 easy to remember categories. It's a mnemonic after all. And then we say, hey, based off what differences that we see, we know what is now being tested in the sentence. So let's go into the sentence and demonstrate what we know about what's being tested. Because I'll tell you this much. Remember, in the world of verbal, you have on average 1 minute and 48 seconds per question. Many of you have zero chance of spending 1 minute 48 on a question like this. This is like a freaking 48 second to 1 minute long question. Why? Because some of us are going to spend 2.5 minutes on a critical reasoning question, and I ain't even going to flinch at that point because I'm cool with that. 2.5 is almost 2 minutes, and 2 minutes is almost 1 minute 48. But if you're spending 2.5 on average on a third of the test, where your average across the test is 1 minute 48, you're basically going over by what, 42 seconds? Which means instead of 1 minute 48 on a third of the test, you have 1 minute and 6 seconds on average. So, hey, you got 1 minute 6 to knock this and a bunch of others out. And that's on average in sentence correction. This is an easy one, because there might be sentence correction questions you want to do 1.5 minutes on. So that means instead of 1 minute 6, I just went over by 24 seconds somewhere else, I got to go over under by 24 seconds here, so I'm at what, 42 seconds on this question. So you start to realize as you start to go through this shit, it's not about just getting it right, but it's about how efficient you're able to process. And that's where strategies such as decision points come into the picture. So now, once I know exactly what's being tested, as I look at the sentence, then I come back in, and then I'm back in the answers on step 3. And at that point, I'm not picking what I know to be right. That's easy to do on the easy questions, but shit, it's tough on the tough ones. So instead, it's about eliminating what you know to be wrong. So question for you as you look at this. What differences do you see emerge that I should start to worry about as I get up into the sentence at the top? What do you see here that's of note for me to pay attention to? Yeah, I think that's great, Francis, right? The little v few. I think that's a huge one because that starts to suggest some countability and not. Oh, great. The and or. Absolutely. From a conjunction point of view, that's very important. Do I need both? Do I not? I love that you guys are picking up on the verb agreement. You got exist versus exist. That's singular v plural. I would argue so is and are, obviously. So you guys are starting to pick up very nicely on the main things that are being tested. And so now, with that in mind, I come back into this question, and I already know. I got to figure out, hey, are things countable or not? Are things singular or not? Are things redundant or not? Like, these are the 3 things that are now in the back of my head. There will be people, and we'll talk more about this after sentence correction week 4, that despite going through a week of sentence correction, still will pop open a question like this, and they'll be like, I don't know. I never know where to start a sentence correction question. And then it makes me just want to slam my head against the door. Because it's like, what? You learn the rules. You learn the strategy. It ain't difficult, man. You just apply. And so now, knowing this stuff, I'm now ready to jump into the sentence and try to figure this out. So I say, okay, forming stunning perches from which hikers can view an endless array of forests and lakes, the high alpine sections of the Wind River mountain range remain barren regions where little water and nutrients exist to sustain plant or animal life. So now I realize, like, okay, this word little is a modifier. It clearly is modifying water, and water is not countable by definition. I can count buckets of water. I can count glasses of water. But in that case, I'm not actually counting water. I'm actually counting the buckets and glasses. So that's cool. It's fine. But this modifier is arguably modifying the nutrients as well. And so the question then is it a logical modification? Does it lead to ambiguity? Am I talking about teeny tiny nutrients, or am I talking about like 1 or 2 nutrients? Because then I got to say, can I count the nutrients? 1 nutrient, 2 nutrients, 3 nutrients, 4. I can count them. In which case, then this is a busted way to start to describe it, because it leaves open the possibility that I might misinterpret it. So I want to tighten this up at this point, and I would do that by not using little. And clearly, you tipping me off on the little v few tells me that. So I look at this and I say, hey, whatever has got a little that could potentially modify nutrients is just wrong. So I come as choice A, and I'm like, you dead. Choice B, you dead too. Choice C, okay, you're alive. I don't know if you're right or wrong, but you're still in contention. Choice D, you dead. Choice E, you're alive. And now I'm down to 50-50 within seconds, because I was able to pick up on, by a vertical scan here, of that little v few difference. So now I say, let's read, see what's what. Few nutrients and little water exists. And is a conjunction that creates the compound subject there. But if it's a compound subject, I need a plural verb, and exists ain't really plural, even though it's got an S. It's a singular way of doing it, so this is wrong. I guess choice E is right. There are few nutrients and little available water. Now, notice compound, plural, countable. I'm good. Choice E for the win. Now, is that the way I would have written this? I would have written my answer on this thing? Meaning, is this the way if I had to rephrase it, I would have done it? No. But unfortunately for me, no one ever asked me for my opinion. Because this test isn't about how would I ever say anything or how would you ever say anything. It's about what's the correct way to say it. And ultimately, there are many correct ways of expressing things. So you have to be very careful and why you want to start to eliminate what you know to be wrong, not start going with what you think to be right. So this is sentence correction as an example. Now, another section of the test is what's known as critical reasoning. Like I said to you before, it's about a third of the test. However, in my opinion, this is going to be, I think, the single most important skill set in the world of verbal. Because you'll start to realize it's also in reading comprehension. It's also in the analytical writing assessment. It's also in integrated reasoning. And arguably, when you get into the world of quant, having a critical mindset pays off as well. And so next week we're going to spend a lot of time in the world of in the world of critical reasoning, trying to hammer that home. So today's lesson at the end is really the skill builder for it, and I think that's important to realize. So this is what an actual critical reasoning question looks like. The critical reasoning. No, you won't ever have that, David. They're going to have 4 incorrects and 1 correct for sure. That's guaranteed. And then if it's more of an opinion, that's a misdirection that occurs. Like, oh, I don't like it. Who cares? And you'll start to realize I never need you to love a right answer. I just need you to like it more than you do 4 others. And so we'll talk more about that, but it's always going to be correct for sure. Okay, with that then, I want to kind of comment here on what a critical reasoning question would look like. Like what you see in front of you is a stimulus. That's the argument that you're trying to consider. Then you have a question stem, and then you have 5 answer choices. This is how critical reasoning looks. Now, you might look at something like this and be like, okay, sweet, so I start in here, then I come down here, and then I go down here. And again, a nice try, but wrong. It's not efficient. So instead, what you want to do is start to think about how to get efficient. And it starts with the actual question stem. And the reason it starts there is because what you start to realize is critical reasoning only has a handful of questions that are possible. We call it the SWIM model. It categorizes everything into those 4 critical categories. And you decide based off of what category it is, what kind of strategy to employ with the actual argument, which then becomes step number 2. So it says the argument above logically depends on which of the following assumptions. So if it's an assumption question, that means it's kind of a strengthen type question. And thus I know what strategy to apply. Because after I do critical reasoning, I then learn that, hey, a strengthen question means I got to focus my attention on the conclusion. I need to provide new information that is relevant, that's more likely to make the conclusion true, not less likely. I don't need to prove anything. However, because it is an assumption question and it's a special subtype, I do need to be able to recognize that this piece of information is absolutely critical to the conclusion being true. Without it, the conclusion falls apart completely. With that in mind, I'm now ready to actually get into the actual paragraph. So then it says, all the athletes who will win a medal in competition have spent many hours training under an elite coach. Mike is coached by one of the world's elite coaches, therefore it follows logically that Mike will win a medal in competition. Well, when I read that, it should seem like a terrible argument. And I can tell you right now, every single strength and weaken question you will see on critical reasoning will be a terrible argument. If it were an airtight argument, there's no way you could strengthen it, there's no way you could weaken it. You will never face that situation. Now, some of us will then say, okay, it's time to get to step 3, go to town, let's go through the answer choices. And I'd say that's a surefire way to, again, mediocrity. 99ers don't do that. 99ers start to think differently. And so one thing that I'm going to try to teach you to start to do next week is pause to predict. And if I can pause to predict and turn this actually into step 4, then I'll get a good sense of what I want to see before I actually see it. Who the hell wants to go to a grocery store when they're hungry without a shopping list? Not me. All I do is end up getting a bunch of shit in my cart that I don't need, that's not good for me, and that costs a lot of money. Instead, if I have and of course I spend God knows how long in that damn market anyways. So instead, if I have a clear idea of what I want, I know how to get in, get out, not a lot of damage, and not a lot of wasted time. And that's what you find is the key in critical reasoning in certain question types. We'll talk much more about this next week. So, question for you. Without getting into these answer choices, as you read this, what info did you say to yourself, we just don't know this though, and we need to know this in order for this all to hold true? What did you think on this? Yeah, very, very nice. So in this case, you guys are saying what about the training, and I think that's absolutely right. You know, you guys are getting right to that time, which is solid. You're saying, look, man, they're telling you the guy has spent many hours under an elite coach. Everyone who's winning is doing just that. But then they tell you that, hey, you know what? He has an elite coach, therefore he's going to win. But it's like, what? No, man. You didn't even tell me about the hours. That's the huge gap in logic. Now, that said, some of you have started to point out things that are very important. Like, talk to me about, was his training actually productive? I get that 100%. Hell, maybe you were a swimming champion back in the day, and you know that back in the day you didn't do well in the swim meets because you're used to goof off, or maybe you rocked it but your friends used to goof off during practice. It's important. It does matter, just not in this question, because nowhere up top do they really even talk about productivity. And that's how this test starts to jack you. If you think that the test maker is your friend, you are delusional. The test maker is out to screw 99% of you folks. He's my friend. He's Megan's friend. He's the friend to 1% of us. But the rest of you, he's looking as soon as you turn around to stick a shiv right in your frickin' side and have you keel over right in front of him. You don't want to be walking around without looking over your back. Trust me on this. And so as you start to go through this, having a better sense of how narrowly tailored these arguments are so that they're not going to punish you for hijacking them, as we'll start to talk about, and bringing our mental inertia into the mix, we start to realize, yeah, D is actually not so relevant. I need to get into something that is. So, does it matter that he hasn't suffered any injuries? It might matter to some, but he might be so good that he breaks 2 arms and 2 legs, and he could still outswim everybody in the pool. I don't need you, choice A. B, Mike's competitor does not spend as much time in training as he did. Some of you started talking about the competition. F the competition. What if the competition did? What if the competition spent double, triple, quadruple the time he does? But he's so gifted at what he does, he still can outswim him. Choice C, Mike's coach trained him for many hours. Hey, C, I love you, but I respect you. And again, you saw perhaps a comment from my student who said as much, because that's going to be a common theme. And when I love something, but I respect them, I take my time. And so with choice C, I want to pick you, I want to rush in, but I'm going to wait, and I want to make sure I'm not overplaying my hand. So D, of course, we said was a bust. We come to E, Mike performs as well in competition as he does in training, and it's like, well, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he gets stage fright. Every time he gets up on that frickin' swimming pool stage, he all of a sudden starts to chicken out. And he chokes on game day. But he's so good at what he does, he still frickin' laps everyone and their mother in the pool. So he's still setting world records. So you know what? Doesn't matter. It looks like only choice C is the right answer here. And again, it's exactly what we're predicting. It's exactly what we're putting on our shopping list. So when we get to Trader Joe's, we walk the F out of that without really a lot of damage. Now, is this an easy question? It's a simple question. It's not tough, but the idea is just to start to illustrate what we should be thinking about. All right, finally here, I just want to talk real quickly on reading comp. It's about a third of this test again. The reality is the way the test has now been restructured, remember it's a shorter test now as of a couple months now, you're not even getting that many questions anymore. You're getting about 4 passes, not even about, I think it's exactly 4, at least from a lot of recent stories. You're just getting, you know, 4 passages, 3 questions a pop, and knock them out and move on. And I think what makes reading comp very difficult on the GMAT is that you don't know what questions you're going to get. Like any other reading comp based exercise you ever did on a practice or on another test, it's freaking simple. You see the passage, you see the questions, shit, you can hunt and gather whatever info you need, and who cares? You don't got that advantage on the GMAT. And so you start to realize you need to have some serious strategy there, despite how easy the actual task may be, because it's, again, about beating the timer to beat the task. So we'll talk about that strategy when we get into reading comp in week 3, a bit out of sequence. And it's all about learning to stop reading, as our mnemonic is, and that really is to get you to focus on 4 key elements in the STOP model. And so when you see a passage like this, which arguably is a rather long passage, even at GMAT standards, you're spending 90 seconds reading it. 2 minutes max. Now some of you may say, what the F? I can barely even freaking pronounce that word, ascaris azzurrae, in 90 seconds correctly. I'll probably stutter over that for 25 seconds. How the hell am I going to read all this in 90 seconds? Because you start to realize as a 99er, no one gives 2 shits about ascaris azzurrae. Like, you're not trying to go to school to become a biologist. You're trying to go to school to become a freaking MBA, unless you're going to have biologists working for you. So it's like, let's try to remember what our goal is and start to read like that here as well. So we'll talk more about this in Reading Comp Day. That's all I want to say here, folks. Let's get into our final break now. We'll take a quick 5-minute break. If you did not get your introduction in the first hour, let's get that up now, please. And then we'll come back in and slowly start to finish this night out. right, guys, let's go ahead and go to town on this next section. No, don't hold this against me. I never said they'd be available through the end of class. And thankfully our boy, Mr. Rogers over there, has got everything there. So if you need it, you could definitely hit up Nate. And maybe he'll be so kind as to email it to you. Or maybe he can even private chat. Actually, he can't even private chat. Oh, there you go. Lauren, you're figuring out the technology here, the real MVP. There we go, dude. Where's Steven now, dude? Steven, dude, I think you're about to get replaced with your rebooting IT tech. Nate's the secret IT machine here. All right. All right. With that, then, let's go ahead and get into... All right, so let's get into GMAT logic. All right, so as a reminder, how does GMAT logic work? Like logic in general. Delegate task. See, you're a leader already, Stephen. Yeah, I could already tell you're on that ride, man. To the not only to the 99, but to making all of us work for you. I like it. All right, so the one thing I want to say is GMAT logic works the same way the way all of logic works, right? So the idea is just use facts or evidence to prove your conclusions. That's what good logic is about. And so they call this syllogistic logic. So syllogism is what this actually is as a noun. And it dates back to the time of Socrates. So here is a great example of great logic. All men are mortal. That's a fact. Socrates is a man. That's another fact. If those two things are true, I can guarantee that Socrates must be mortal. That's a conclusion that's 100% valid. Why? Because there's no gap in logic there. It connects together very beautifully. Now, on the GMAT, you're rarely, if ever, going to see logic that looks that way. Instead, you start to see busted ass logic like this. As an example, it says, all men are mortal. Exactly, Molly. So it says, all men are mortal. Socrates is a dog. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. And it's like, huh? These might be facts. How the hell am I going to draw this conclusion? Again, notice the gap in logic here. Now, am I suggesting to you that Socrates is not mortal? No. I am suggesting to you that I just don't know. He might be, he might not be, I just don't know. That's why it's a bad argument. But if I could actually tighten up the logic, if I could actually say, hey man, all dogs are actually men. Basically, if you're a dog, you are a man. Like if I could say that, then all of a sudden I could draw this conclusion. But without it, hell no. Same thing over here. It says all men are mortal. Socrates is mortal. So there it might actually start to look like I've got the argument down. Thus, Socrates is a man. These are more pressing questions for sure. And so the one thing that's going to be for critical reasoning next week. Sorry, Miss Conroy. Apparently she wants it this week. So the one thing that I would say to you as you go through this is you have to appreciate that I'm not telling you that Socrates is not a man. That's not what I'm saying to you. I don't know. All I know is that all of them are mortal. And I know Socrates is mortal, but that doesn't tell me that all mortals are men, though. And I think this is where you start to have the breakdown. So here, this is pretty obvious that there's a gap in logic. Here, less so. And that's how the GMAT starts to screw you. They start to swap words out and hope you don't realize it. Now, are you going to see only these 3-line syllogisms? Hell no. Instead, they give you the paragraphs, like what we saw earlier, in the form of what they call stimuli, or stimulus, and multiple of them are stimuli. So here, you start to see like something more like, hey, I was thinking about Socrates the other day, and notice something interesting. You know, Socrates is a man, and all men are mortal, so Socrates must be mortal. Like that becomes your little paragraph of dialogue that some guy says. Some of it's background noise, stuff that kind of puts it into context. Some of it is actually the facts or evidence you need, and some of it's the actual conclusion that's being dropped. You ain't ever going to get it all nicely categorized for you. In fact, some of the questions require you to do just that. We call them method of reasoning questions. So you want to be able to start picking up on this stuff, specifically the conclusions. Conclusions are so freaking important, guys, just in life in general, but certainly in argument structure and logic. And so what you want to start to appreciate is that there are 4 really quick and easy ways to identify conclusions. 3 ways are going to be just based off of trigger wording. If I spot the trigger word, boom, I got me a conclusion. So this is the easiest, conclusionary language. That ain't complicated. Therefore, as a result, hence, in conclusion, okay, I see what's stared at me. The second test is the call for action. This is also based off of trigger wording, that is, calling you to do things. So for example, you should do this. It's important that this happen. We need to do this. That's all a freaking sign that you have a conclusion in front of you. The third test is what's known as the premise language test. And the premise language test basically says, hey, if you're using premise language, wording that suggests you're about to drop some facts or evidence, because, since, considering, given, in light of, so on and so forth, the only reason you're using that language is to somehow explain something. And as a reminder, a syllogism is just premise, premise, conclusion. The conclusion is essentially explained by some evidence. So the only reason you're trying to specifically hit me over the head with a premise-based term is because you're trying to probably explain something to me and drop a conclusion along the way. So these 3 tests are all trigger language dependent. They are super important tests because they're so damn easy to use. The problem with the GMAT is it's not always easy. And thus there are times where you won't even be able to use those 3 tests, in which case you're effed. Well, not so much, because there's a 4th test that's the most powerful test of them all, but also kind of sucks because it takes time. It's called the Y test. And the Y test is good. And the Y test is based a little bit off what we just did, because it basically says, hey man, if you're going to give me a conclusion, you better come with a reason why, otherwise get out. It's not a conclusion. And so if you take a look at this sentence as an example, you see it is raining, comma, so the parade will be canceled. Now ignore for a second that I think so is just conclusionary language, so that would be the conclusion anyways. Instead, just ask yourself, hey, do they tell me why it's raining? No. That ain't a conclusion then. Do they tell me why the parade will be canceled? I think so. I think it's because it's damn rain. And thus, I'm led to believe that that's the conclusion because it came with a reason why. That's the Y test. Again, it takes time, so I don't like to use it. But I love it because it will always work. So if I can avoid it, boom, here I am. If I can't, okay. Now, what's the test going to do? Kick things up by yet another notch. They ain't going to just give you one conclusion. They'll give you multiple conclusions. Then they're going to ask you to strengthen or weaken. And you're like, well, which one should I work with? You got to identify the main conclusion and work on that one. So how do you define the main conclusion? How do you weed out the intermediate conclusions? Well, a main conclusion will never be used to support another conclusion. That's the way it rolls. So here, notice what it says. It says, it is raining, comma, so the parade will be canceled, comma, and then the Rotary Club will need to find another fundraiser for this year. So this is conclusionary language. This is a call for action. So we arguably have 2 conclusions here. Do they use the parade will be canceled to support anything? Yeah. They use it to support this need to find another fundraiser. Why are they trying to find another fundraiser? Because this got canceled. That's why. That starts to tell me that this is an intermediate conclusion, and that's my main guy. And now, just to be certain, do they ever use this to support something else? Do they ever explain why to something else to say, oh, it's because they need to find another fundraiser? No. The parade's going to be canceled. Why? Because they need to find another fundraiser? No, that's not the reason. So, yep, this is the main conclusion. So, as you start to go through these arguments and you start to look for main and auxiliary or intermediate conclusions, start to use that Y-test. Again, the Y-test is the most powerful test there is, so great. It just sucks because it takes time. Now, one thing you're going to start to realize, again, we started to see it already with, say, that men v. dog example earlier, is that logic comes down to language. What words you use, what words you don't use. And as I said earlier, remember, this whole critical reasoning mindset, and first of all, section, question type is ripped straight from the LSAT, the law school test. What you're going to start to realize is like, and I'm going to try to teach you this next week, is to learn to think like lawyers in here. Is that lawyers, basically all we do is just screw people with the words we use, or the words we choose not to use. And therefore, being on high alert with this precision of language becomes very, very important. And so reality is, on the test, you start to get arguments, especially as the questions get harder, to be far more subtle with the way they kind of swap things out. But your job, when you see swapping taking place, is to just ask one question: why are you swapping on me? And the answer I'll tell you right now is to screw you. But just by asking that question, you're going to start to see the screwing coming a mile away, and then you just sidestep it and you don't get screwed. And that's something you want to be thinking about, again, on high alert. So take a look at some of these examples here, and I just want to kind of walk through them. Look at this first guy. Do you think this is a good argument or a bad argument, guys? It says, I support the Lakers. Kobe plays for the Lakers. Therefore, I support Kobe. What do you think about this? Is it a good argument or a bad one? Damn, Tyler, terrible. Damn, Gabby, a chuckster there. I love it. It's probably true, but bad. So here's the good news here. I haven't seen one single person tell me it's a good argument, which is great. You know, Ohio against the world. Oh, Rayshawn, man. Don't tell me you're burning jerseys at this point. The one thing that I will say as we go through this is you got to be careful. And thankfully you guys were. You brought respect on this. You didn't just say, oh yeah, man, at this point, of course, Kobe is the Lakers, the Mamba. Of course it's a good argument. It's like, what? Oh man, just be careful. Next thing you know, El Presidente will find some reason to make sure burning jerseys is a problem as well, but I'll leave that for another day. The one thing that you want to make sure you recognize here is, again, this is very subtle. I don't know if it's that subtle, but the one thing you realize is, like, they're just kind of swapping these words. Like, oh yeah, man, if you support the Lakers, that means you got to support Kobe. And it's like, no, you don't have to. You can just actually root for everybody else and hope he falls and, like, can't even freaking play. Like, you can do that. And so here you start to find some of that trickery there. Now, are you ever going to see a question involving Kobe and the Lakers? No, ever, never. But could you see something that's all about the whole versus the individual? Exactly, all day long. I can be like, oh yeah, man, I support the U.S. government, and you know, my president is a part of the U.S. government, therefore I support my president. It's like, well, not necessarily. I didn't say I support each and every single member of the U.S. government. So these are some things that you have to start to think about. Like, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm not a very political person, but if your goal is to make America great again, this may not be the class for you. I may rub you the wrong way, and that's okay. I don't care. Take a look at this argument here. Is this a good argument? It says all linebackers play dirty. Some linebackers are Raiders. Therefore, some Raiders play dirty. Is that good or is that bad? What do you think on this one? Valid or not? No way, dude. Kanye's running, Tyler. My hope is on Kanye, dude, or The Rock. Oh my God, dude. My tweets are. Oh geez, no, Ashwin, you don't want that. Oh, Kyle. So here's what I will say. You know, some people. This is obviously a great argument. I've had some. Dude, I love the People's Channel. There are some people that will say that, man, even the Raider fans are dirty. So, but you guys are 100% correct. This is a great argument. If all of them are dirty and some of them are Raiders, then of course some of them have to be dirty. So that's for sure true. Yes, so Brandon, yes. Coastal liberal elites here in the mix. All right, so how about number 3 here? Is this a good argument or a bad argument? It says all widgets are steel, some widgets are red, therefore some steel widgets are not red. What do you think? Good argument or a bad one? Valid or not? Horrendous. Wow. This is good. I like this. So some of you guys are saying good. A lot of you are saying bad. And this is great because for me, that means we're about to learn something. Here, we didn't learn shit. We knew it. Here, we didn't learn shit. We knew it. But right now, we're about to learn something, which is great. Again, I ain't going to be sad that I get this wrong. I'm going to be excited because I'm going to get my ass handed to me again. And so I want to make sure you start to see now how lawyer logic is very different than what we like to think of as logic. I think a lot of people equate the words some with not all. I think in the back of your mind, this is how you start to work. No, change back, David. It's still not too late. So the one thing that I would say with you, or say to you, is the word some actually has a definition of essentially at least one. That's what some means. So it could be one, but it could actually go all the way to all. Because some is like a sampling. Not all means just that. Anything but all. So really it starts at all minus 1 and continues all the way down to 0. So just even on this spectrum here, is there overlap? Hell yeah. From basically 1 to all minus 1. They're interchangeable. But what about the extremes? 0. I can't use some there. What about all? I can't use not all there. So what I'm starting to see from this is, hey, when I see some, I'm actually saying, hey, at least one widget is red. At least one is red. Does that mean I know for a fact that at least one is not? Hell no, I don't know shit. Because some could have been all, and now I just got my ass handed to me. But that's okay, I learned from it. This is a terrible argument. And so just again, as a kind of a simple illustration, it would be like, hey, I go home after class and my wife says, hey, how was your first day of teaching? I say, good. Some of my students want to do well on this test. And then she says to me at that point, oh, so does that mean that some of your students don't want to do well on this test? And I'd be like, woman, what are you talking about? I'm pretty positive they all want to do well. It's just that, you know, only a handful private chatted me during the break, so as a result, they're the ones who straight up told me I want to do well. I assume everyone wants to do well, but these guys are telling me that. That's why I'm saying that. Because some is just a sampling, folks. So you have to start to appreciate that. And if right now you didn't realize that some is not the same as not all, great. Put that on a flashcard, never get it wrong again. That's what the GMAT journey is about. Figure out what you don't know and then know it. Now, even here, talking about precision in language, notice what it says, logical opposites. I think a lot of times we think of opposites and we think, well, yeah, that's logical, they're logical opposites. And it's like, no. When we think of opposites, we often think of actually polar opposites. We have the spectrum, it's either this or that, but on the opposite ends of the scale. We don't account for everything in between. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great example, Stephen, hot and cold. You know, it's like, no, those aren't the opposites. The opposites are hot and not hot, or cold and not cold. Because I could have warm, I could have tepid, I could have lukewarm, all this bullshit. So even here, like, oh yeah, what's the opposite of must be true? Clearly, must be false. It's like, no. Must be true is on one end of the spectrum. What's on the rest of it? Well, must be false is on the way opposite end, but I got to account for all the other stuff along the way, which includes the stuff that's not necessarily true. How about the always? Clearly the opposite of always is never. It's like, no. If I have always on one hand, then look at the other stuff. I have not always, because that would include the never, it would include the one time, the two times, the three times, the four times, and to me, that's what you want to start to see. In fact, it's like all. The opposite of all is none. No, it's not. The opposite of all, as we just started to see, is actually not all. Because basically it's including the none and the one and the two and the three and so on. Now, is this a list that I want you to memorize? Hell no. I want you to start to just reason this out. And one of the quickest ways to start to reason it out is just go negative. Start to introduce negative words. Negation, that starts to become the key here. So with that, then I kind of want to wrap up this section here with regard to some GMAT logic. Man, my smartboard's acting up. I want to get into maybe a question here of sorts. And then we'll kind of slowly start to wrap this up here, if I can get this up on the board. Damn. All right, so sometimes my smartboard is not going to want to cooperate with me. So here's the first question that I want to tackle here. This question is going to be important because it's a nice critical reasoning based question. And so what I want you to do on this question is read it and answer it. So if you notice, it says, which of the following is an assumption required by the argument? So an assumption means there's a fact that hasn't been given to you. It's kind of like the question we did earlier. Your job then is to kind of think about what that fact is before you come into these answer choices. Now, the one thing that I'm going to say to you when that happens is that there is one answer choice that I think is really, really persuasive here. God damn. That someone is likely to really want to actually walk into. Your job then is to think about that and then avoid it. So as we go through these questions in here, today is sort of obviously the first day, so we haven't even freaking gotten even our toes wet, let alone our feet wet. You're going to start to realize that there are common ways that the test maker tries to ruin your life. One of which is to get you into autopilot mode. So this question here has a lot of mental inertia in the mix. And so the one thing you start to see is like, hey, someone reads this and then they just kind of go into autopilot and boom, this is the answer they're going to walk into. Don't do it. Just see it. And so what you're going to start to realize, so when we open the polls, you'll always put your right answer in there. Let's be clear on that. You don't need to hit confirm or submit or anything just by bubbling like you guys did at the first hour. You always put your right answer in there. Don't ever put what you think is a trap answer on the poll. The poll is just like I said, we're on GMAT test day. You don't decide to say, oh, that's the trap answer, I'm going to bubble it. What? No, you bubble the right answer. But I want you always thinking about the trap. And what you're going to start to find is that people that do very well in this course and therefore on this test have an acute sense of trap answer awareness. They're always seeing them. It's like peripheral vision. You always see the test maker coming a mile away trying to shank you. You ain't going to let them because you can see it. And so the one thing that I want you to do is think about that. So here's what I want to do. We'll do one question, then we'll slowly call it a night. Let's put 2 on the clock. We'll open up the polls whenever we open up the polls. Let's see what we think is the number one right answer. Let's get that in the poll. But then I also want you to start to learn from when the polls get broadcast. Because I think when the polls get broadcast, we learn a lot of information as well. We learn, are we on the island? Like earlier, we had that person that was like in the 500s. Hey, I don't want you to be there. Freaking let's aim high. Let's get to the top. But like on a question like this, am I picking a dog shit answer that no one even thinks is a good one? Why am I the only guy there? That's a problem. Especially if I'm there question after question after question. Hey, did I know what the trap answer is going to be? Did I know when the poll got broadcast what the number one wrong answer is? Because I could tell you right now without even going through this poll what it's going to be. Because that's how predictable not only this test is, but the people taking the test are. And if I can start to climb that pyramid and get to that test maker's mindset, dude, I can run circles around all this stuff. And that's what I want you to start to realize, because that's going to be you if we start to do just that. All right, with that then, let's put 2 on the clock. Let's bring some respect on this question. It ain't an easy question, but it ain't that hard either. I want us to start to see it and do it. Let's talk when time's up. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into this. Such a nice job on this question. I am so damn impressed, guys. This is such a great start as a collaboration for the whole class. Because what you're telling me right now, at least according to the poll, is not one single person thinks choice A is good or choice D is good. Everybody has said that's complete dog shit. And that's huge. They really are. And so to me, all I have left on the board are the right answer, what I'm going to call the high-level trap answer, as well as what I will call the low-level trap answer. That's a really great place to be, guys. And I have not seen this in a long-ass time, and I've been doing this for a long time. So that's something to commend right off the bat. And in fact, if we could stay like this as we get into like the real lessons moving forward on verbal side, dude, we should be able to get through quite a bit and work on a much higher level. Because if instead I got to be like, well, let's actually talk about why it's not a compelling national priority. Like, what the hell? Hell no, that's a joke. So great job. We're in the BCE world right now. So let's rewind back on this question. Now, notice what we had here. The conclusion, call for action, conclusionary language, that what? The North American children can be made physically fit only if they participate in the school calisthenics. Now, is that a good argument? I don't think so. We had all this other crap up top that they tried to use to support it, but it was still a bust. It said in Europe, the school children devote time during each school day to calisthenics. The North American schools rarely offer them. And the test proved that the North American children are weaker, slower, and shorter-winded than the Euros. Therefore, there's our conclusion. Question for you. As you go through this, or as you went through this, what did you think was going to be the number one wrong answer that you felt that someone who is just a little bit too in that kumbaya spirit perhaps was going to want to pick, and they were going to pick it, and they were going to felt like it was a good answer, but it really wasn't. It was a little bit too much, a little bit unnecessary. And I get it, but I ain't touching it. What do you guys think on this? And maybe you possibly even grappled with it, and that's okay too. Dude, you guys might be all a frickin' bunch of secret critical reasoning gunning machines. Very frickin' nice, man. I really am impressed. Absolutely, it is choice C. So question for you. In choice C, there are two words that really should make me concerned. What are the two words that should concern me, folks? Because you guys are 100% correct. Yeah, awesome, awesome, awesome. You guys are saying, hey, how about this all? And how about this equally bit? And you guys are 100% correct. I love it. Because check it, I understand why this seems important, but all would include, in this case, say my cousins in India, and this argument don't give two shits about my cousins in India. This is about North Americans versus the Europeans. Like this, it's overkill. Let alone equally fit, that ain't that important. In this case, they're trying to say, we just want the North Americans fit. We don't need them as fit as their Euro brethren. So like you start to realize that this is nice. This would be great. You know, this is kumbaya, but the reality is no. You don't need it. It is not required. Choice C, dead. But choice C is the high-level trap. About 35% of you picked it. The poll kind of got a little screwy just now. So from my recall of it, at least, that's the key here. Now, that said, take a look at the other option. But before we get there, I want us to think about prediction, right? We have to learn to pause to predict, as I like to say. So there should have been a gap in logic that was present. You should have said to yourself, like, wait a minute. Who's to say that these freaking calisthenics are going to get my kids fit? Is it possible that the reason they ain't fit is because they're supersizing all the damn time, and in Europe they don't supersize their McDonald's fries, so maybe that's the rationale? Show me the causal connection. Don't just throw some correlation my way and get me to bite. And with that in mind is how I want to start to go through these questions. Because next week when we get into critical reasoning, we start to realize, like, man, there's so many different commonly reoccurring setups that if I could start to learn them, I could start to look for them. And so now I come to these questions and I say, oh, geez, choice, I come to choice B. School calisthenics programs are an indispensable factor in Euro fitness. Damn, you're telling me calisthenics indispensable to fitness? I love you, choice B, because you're 100% in line with my prediction. But I respect you. So I'm going to take my time, man. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I'll check out choice E, make sure this is the right move, and then lock it down. So what does choice E say? American PE teachers are capable of designing a successful calisthenics program. And it's like, okay, I get its appeal. I mean, if we're going to be doing this, we got to make sure our coaches can do it too. And it's like, well, wait a minute. If I'm already ripping off the Euros with their program, why can't I just outsource even this development to them? Like, I don't need this short guy doing it for me. Choice B all day long. And choice E is the classic low-level trap, and a lot of people pick that as well. But it's not as good as this. And I want you to start to understand, even when I say high level and low level, what that actually means. So if, on this question here, like let's just clean this up a little bit. B, of course, right answer. Let's just say, in this case, this is a 99er level question. And it's not, but it's a 7-something. So in this case, let's just say, in this case, you know, and about half of us got it right. No one picked choice A. That, sometimes the polls will get screwy, by the way. I would say, hey, like, you know, let's just say, argument's sake, 760 plus is the B answer. No, let's not get that crazy. Let's say, yeah, 700, okay? So if I get this right, I'm on that road to the 700. Choice C was the high-level trap. So I'd say, okay, well, that's like the 600 level question answer. Like the guy who's going to pick choice C is the guy who's getting a 600. That's like the best he can muster up. The low-level trap is the guy who's in the rear-view mirror of the 600 guy. So this guy's like getting the 500 over here. Like he's picking choice E. He should have been at least in C, but he picked E, and the test maker's constantly just trying to weed people out. So he's gotten weeded out. He's on the 500 track. So where are the D's? Where are the A's? These are like the 400s. And thankfully, no one today is on the road to the 400 because we're like, oh yeah, man, those A's and D's, garbage answers. Everyone eliminated them. Like there are things in E that are actually appealing. There are things in C that are actually appealing. But you start to realize that when you are looking for trap answers, like, and I'm so thankful, you guys all said, hey, what's the trap answer? You're like C, 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 C. No one said E. If you had said E, chances are very high you probably ended up in C. Because the only guy you're looking at your rearview mirror is this fool, but you don't want to be that guy. You don't want your competition to be the 500 level candidate. You want your competition to be the 600 level candidate if this is a 700 level question. So that's the way I want you to start to think. We'll talk much more about this again in the weeks ahead. But you know, when I start talking about high level traps, low level traps, they're all arbitrary. They're all my own opinions on things. But having that kind of mindset, I think, is critical to just destroying this test. Here's another good question. Take a look at that later. You know, this book, by the way, has a ton of questions in it. I don't think you need to do any of the math ones, to be honest. I think there's nothing to, I don't want to say nothing to be gained, but there's a lot of stuff you should be working on instead of that. But if instead you want to do some of the critical reasoning questions, knock yourself out, because I think they're really good to really hammer home that logic. So for homework, do all the critical reasoning questions in the book. I want to talk about how to get the most out of this course real quickly, and a lot of this I've already covered ad nauseum in my email welcoming you to the course, folks. And by the way, on that note, I would read my email multiple times. You'd be surprised how many times students will say to me, they only on the second or third time realize, like, shit, you already talked about this, like this, that. Like I write very densely, I teach very densely, but there's a lot there. There's no shame to going back, rereading, rewatching, so on. So the first point, actually on that note, let me comment on this very quickly. Like, you know, I don't generally get retake students unless you totally mailed it in the first time. Then in that case, fine. But if you actually gave it the old college effort, then like you're seeing the same questions, you're seeing the same stuff. Like, what are you getting out of it? I don't know. You probably need to change things up. So I once had a retake of my own, and I don't typically have my own retakes. And for no other reason, it just doesn't make sense. But it was an interesting situation that I had this retake, because this guy got like a 710 or something, or I don't even know, but it was a 7 something. And I was like, what the F are you doing back? And he said to me, he's like, well, you know I can do better, right? And I was like, of course. He's like, I was thrilled in the beginning before I started the course to get a 7 something, but now that I freaking took your course, now I feel like a chump for getting a 700 or 710 or whatever it was. And I was like, okay, I agree, you can do better. It's 99 or bust, so go do better. He's like, no, but I want to take the class again with you. I was like, okay, fine. I think it's a bad idea, but fine. And so then at the end of the 36 hours, I straight up asked him, I was like, dude, so on a scale of a waste of your time to a colossal waste of your time, by the way, on one end of the spectrum, to the other end of the spectrum, which is you robbed me of 36 hours of my life that I'm never going to get back, and I hate you for allowing me to do it. Like, that's the spectrum. Where exactly would you say this experience fell? And he's like, you idiot, it's not even on that spectrum. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, and legit, this is what he says. He says something to the effect of, I learned so much more this time through. And I was like, what? It's all the same damn questions. Like, at some point, like, even my approaches are going to be, I don't say the same exact thing every single time, but at some point, like, a lot of the things I'm going to do are going to be the same. Like, how the hell did you learn so much more this time through? And what he said was, he said, dude, like, you talk about so many different things that I don't even think my mind was ready for them that first time through. And then the second time through, like, it all like opened up like freaking, I don't know, like the sky, the clouds parted and everything was dropping out. I said, hey, great, knock that test out. And so to me, what that tells me is even if I sit through a class in the year and I do it one time, there's probably a shitload of things that I missed. And just as another example, just like about 2 courses ago, I had a guy who, you know, was kind of shaky in the world of quant. And I said, dude, you need to go back and watch these videos again because you ain't picking up what's being laid down. And he watched the arithmetic video just again. And I'm talking about arithmetic because we're doing that on Wednesday. Homeboy, after he watched it, said he found 20, 21, 22 different takeaways that were dropped during class. And when he said that, I was like, well, you know, he's probably picking up a bunch of shit that weren't real takeaways, but whatever. And then he sent them to me. And I went through them. And I was like, damn. Hey, I didn't realize that I had packed the class so full, but they were like legitimate great points of learning that should have been picked up by the students. And he didn't pick them up the first time. He watched the video again. Next time, you got 21. And after that, that was like his eye-opening experience. And that was like midway through the course, he started going back. And at that point, he's like, shit, I got to be doing this on every lesson. So I'm kind of just making sure you guys hear that very loud and clear very early on, because you know, when they say, oh, complete the skill builders before class, this is a very piss poor standard in my opinion. Again, given that like 90% of us want a 7-something, you got to come to class crushing it. And even when you do, there's no shame if things start to go over your head. Not just going, oh, well, you know, it ain't ever going to happen. It's instead like, no, dig deeper. Lean in, as they say, and come back and rewatch. Hit up office hours. Get what you need done. Ask me a private chat as needed. Like, you want to start to cement this, because this isn't hard. You just need to do it right. So you got to build the base. Again, that's important. I'm not going to handhold people that come into class on Wednesday going, hey, so what's a fraction again? F that, get out. Now, complete at least half of the homework. I think that's important. But some of us, life's going to start to interfere with us. Start to realize very early on how your schedule looks and how much time you're going to have to dedicate. Like, you know who you are at your core. Like, if you're a poet, don't tell me like, yeah, I just got to do skill builder for an hour on the subway before I get to class, before I get home from work. What? You're going to fail. Like, don't do that. Like, start to be realistic. Start to thumb through everything. You know the schedule. I've already laid it out for you. And I've done it in a way that you only got to do one skill builder every week anyway. So I'm trying to help you succeed here. But if you can't get the homework done, homework's important because you're just putting into practice what you're learning, at least come to class prepared. Because I think the skill builder trumps homework, always. Because you paid for a class, might as well be here and be ready for it every single time. But you got to do both. That's a reality. Think conceptually. I think that's important. You got to think big picture. If all you are is this micro shit where all you're worrying about is this rule, this solution, this problem, you ain't going to win. Because everything is scalable. And if you have a tough time connecting dots, you're going to lose. This point is all important, guys. I think this is, this is what I think is such an important philosophy to have, just in general, but I think especially with test prep, it's all important. Never mistake activity for achievement. I think legit, there will be people on Wednesday that will come to class and they will tell me and almost expect a pat on the back, like, oh yeah, man, like I got like a 95 on the quiz the first time through. I missed like only like 5 questions. I was like, well, who cares? Like, that's a number. Like, who cares? Like, to take that by extension even on practice test scores, who cares? Tell me what you learned in those 5 questions that you missed. Tell me in those other 50 questions that you got right, how probably you only did about 40 of them correct, meaning the other 10 you probably guessed on, and or you did it in an ass backwards way and you probably learned a better way to do it. Tell me about those 10. That's what I'm more concerned about. Like, who cares about what you get right? It's all about finding out what you did wrong and learning from that. So just because you can say you did something and you can talk about what percentage you got right and wrong, who cares? You got to be able to talk about what you learned. So never mistake activity for achievement. If you clock in and clock out on this experience, you will get just that same exact result out of this. Again, I'm very emphatic about saying that. You get out is what you put in. Some people think it's the greatest thing ever. Some people think it's the biggest ripoff in the world. It's the same damn thing in both camps. So what's the difference? It's you. Just make sure you understand that. Look at this last point. I think this is good. Embrace mistakes. Hey, I have a zero tolerance for nonsense. I have a zero tolerance for sloppiness. I have a zero tolerance for false negatives. But I don't have a zero tolerance for mistakes. So, I want to make sure we understand that. I embrace mistakes. Again, I'm very open to mistakes. I just don't want mistakes being made over and over in the same line. Like, if moving forward I F up, hey, some versus not all. That's not good. We talked about it today. What did you waste all that time and money for us even talking about it for? So that's what I want you to start to have some personal accountability. Again, hey, 90% of us want a 7 something. This ain't a test where you just sign up for $250 for the freaking test, and then you pay for a Veritas course, you show up for 36 hours, clocking in, clocking out, and boom, they give it to me. So I can go work on my HBS application. It don't happen that way. I'm telling you right now, this test humbles many people. There are many giants that fall on this. Just like there are many idiots that crush this test, because this test ain't hard. You just have to understand what it's about and how to tackle it. And that's why I say, hey, that first day, the first hour of the first day is the most important. All right, I'm done with today, guys. Sorry for running class so damn late. What's in store for Wednesday? Arithmetic. Easily the single most important math lesson of the entire course. Easily. Please do not underestimate its significance. I cannot stress that enough. Come to class having crushed the skill builder. The lesson will be a good one. It'll probably send some of you into the fetal position, and that's okay. We got to learn. But don't learn the mistake of, oh, I didn't come to class prepared, and now I realize it. F that. Come to class prepared. That's all I got to say here, folks. Listen, this class is not for everybody, and that's okay. I don't try to be. I'm a 99er, and I want to teach with this mentality of it's 99 or bust. You go big or you go home. The reason I teach that way is because everything else in your application is set. Your grades are set, your life story is set, your career is set. The only thing you can freaking change for your apps right now is your GMAT score. And since any idiot can crush this test, Exhibit A, why not you? That's it, man. All right, that's all I got to say, everybody. Sorry for running class late, but welcome to the first day of class. Hope you guys all had an informative session. We're coming back strong for day 2 on Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your night, everybody. I will see you all at the same time as usual. Thank you, everyone.